All right, hello. I guess we're live. So this is the Flying In Hangout number 2, Whither the Culture War. So I think on this particular hangout, we're going to be doing a little bit more of a focused discussion on the culture war. So I'm hearing some feedback here, but so check everyone's microphone. Okay, I might start muting people if...
I'm using head.
Okay.
What?
Is someone hearing feedback besides me? It's text in the chat. Okay. Sorry, guys. I think it was... I think I got it now. Okay, great. So can you unmute yourselves? Because I think we're now ready to start. Sorry about that false start. But on this chat, we're going to be discussing culture war issues. In particular, we're trying to answer the question, have conservatives lost the culture war, or have traditionalists lost the culture war? So with that, I guess we can start kicking off and answering the 3 questions that I had, which were really, have conservatives lost the culture war? Why did it happen? The second one is, now that we've lost it, what's sort of the new cultural norm? What is the future going to look like? And the third thing is the classic question of what is to be done. So anyone want to take on the first question about what happened with the culture war?
All right. I'll start.
Okay, go for it.
Well, I think, yes. I mean, to answer the first question, yes, we did lose, obviously. And I think a bit, a very brief answer as to why I think so. It's because we both misunderstood I think it's because we made massive strategic blunders in how we engage with the culture, and we didn't understand the demographic reality of what was happening. Like, I mean, trying to support creationism, going after Dungeons and Dragons, going after stuff like that. I mean, that really just screwed us, and it helped create this great anti-Christian narrative of, hey, look at these evil Christians trying to tell us who we can love, who we can marry, what we can do with ourselves, and it just made us out to look like the horrible bad guys.
We came off as authoritarian.
Yeah, we tried to engage it too much from top down rather than bottom up.
I'd like to respond to that if I could.
Yeah. No, you can respond to something somebody says at any time. Just if you don't want to do a longer thing, just put it in.
Okay. Well, okay. I'd like to say, there's 2 things with this. One, I think it's taking the metaphor of a war a little too far to talk about the culture war as something that's won or lost definitively, but we certainly have had major setbacks, and if there was such a thing as losing the culture war, then we didn't lose it. Our parents' generation did.
I happen to concur with that, but go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, once we accepted divorce, once we accepted a lot of the things we accepted way back in the early to mid 20th century, the rest of it, the 60s and the rest of it was just preordained from that.
Todd, did you have something to respond to say about this particular question?
Yeah, sure. Well, as far as winning or losing the culture war, I think, to use an analogy, Thomas Jefferson said the war for the liberty demands eternal vigilance. The struggle against tyranny never ends, at least until we die. The culture war never ends, at least until we die. So, I mean, technically we've had a lot of setbacks, but I think the war is just an eternal war until, the end of time. But the other thing is, I would disagree with Fritz on this thing. It's not that we came off as authoritarian. The left loves authoritarians. The Marxists and the communists, a lot of those hippies were protesting for Chairman Mao back in the 60s. The problem was we didn't understand on what front we were being attacked. For instance, the sexual revolution was masterminded, well, not entirely masterminded, but heavily influenced by 2 individuals. Marcuse, who was a Frankfurt School Marxist, and Alfred Kinsey, who was funded by the Rockefeller Foundation in his studies of human sexuality. Without getting into too much detail, Kinsey's research was largely fraudulent, and he basically hired child molesters to molest, prepubescent children.
There are a lot of questionable things with Kinsey's research.
Exactly, but see, Kinsey's research is the, quote, scientific stamp of acceptability of modern liberal sexuality. And of course, if Kinsey had not, all these laws were rewritten against sodomy and divorce based on Kinsey's research. If that research had been stifled or discredited, it's quite likely that we wouldn't have gotten as far as we did. But because we didn't realize...
I'm skeptical because I think that Kinsey was just the person repeating these particular untruths when the birth control pill came around. Yeah. And there are other people, there are people from the 20s and the 19th century who kind of repeated the same crap that Kinsey was talking about. But I
know that. But what I'm saying is Kinsey made it credible. He made it credible by giving it a scientific veneer because science,
Freud
to the modern
did
leftist.
That.
No, not the way Kinsey did.
Sigmund Freud did that, I thought.
Matt, do you have a contention about Todd's point?
The robot's back.
I didn't hear what you said.
Does Matt have a contention about Todd's point?
It was a pretty big point. I don't know anything about this research or anything else. Something you said at the beginning of it, I caused a knee-jerk reaction, but now I kind of forgot what it was because I was enthralled with the last half of it.
Okay. Well, sorry to interrupt you, Todd. Continue, please.
Yeah, no. Of course, I know there were people before Kinsey. There was Freud, and of course, Marcuse combined Freud with Marxism, with this polymorphous perversity. But the point is, the new religion of our age is scientism, and if you can prove it, quote, scientifically, that's the gospel truth. And so when Kinsey demonstrated, quote unquote, scientifically that humans are born sexual, that completely discredited in the minds of many people, and they couldn't change the laws until Kinsey did the research to, quote, scientifically prove it.
Sure, but didn't you? I have to agree here with Ben, though, because people would have seen Freud as a scientist, too. And the cult of science is earlier
Marx
than
himself.
Perhaps Marx, but just to make it a little bit less controversial, I think Freud would be sort of like the first thing that people would be like, oh my god, that's just psychological science. And he said a lot of the same things that Kinsey did.
Yeah, well, yes, but nobody changed the laws of the country until after Kinsey wrote that scientific...
Who keeps on saying, can I chime in here?
Jonathan, I'm the new guy. Hi, guys.
Okay, hey, how's it going? Yeah.
Yo. Yeah, I just got my audio fixed. I'm sorry about that. I had to do a little tweaking.
If you want to reply to something Todd said, just go right ahead.
Yeah, well, I just want to reply to the general topic because there's a guy named Benjamin Weicker. He's a Catholic, and he was talking about the idea that actually we started to lose the culture war like 500 years ago. And there's some very key ideas or whatever that have creeped into kind of our liberal idea. I'm sorry, what?
No, I'm just saying that kind of sentiment is quite Catholic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I tied to the Reformation, and as a Protestant here, I can say sorry, guys. But right.
I will be accepting
You're not alone.
apologies for the Reformation after this podcast. Thank you very much.
I know. Anyways, he points. He did a great thing on C-SPAN or whatever that I watched, and he points to 10 specific works. And amongst those he points to Rousseau, and when we're talking about the sexual revolution, Rousseau was the first one who came up really with the concept of this idea of a liberated sexuality, except it was on the masculine side. Man was there to have as much casual sex as he could, and to, this idea of the breakdown of the family really started much earlier than we think it did. And I mean, if you want to go back to one of the oldest ideas that started challenging Christianity and stuff, it was you go back to Machiavelli.
Oh, I was going to say, please don't give me the idea that the sexual revolution was caused by Plato saying to destroy the family in the Republic.
No.
That didn't have anything to do with this.
No. But Betty Friedan, when she wrote, let's see here,
the feminist mystique.
The feminist mystique, right? That's just really completing this kind of sexual revolution and this divorcing of the family. The idea of complete and total autonomy, our liberal concept of complete a person as a vessel of rights, that completely goes against the Christian idea of sexuality.
I would actually totally agree with that. I was only describing the immediate proximate cause.
Right, I know. Yeah,
I think the immediate proximate cause was the birth control pill. I think I have to agree with Data here that, you know, without the birth control pill, there wouldn't be a sexual revolution because you couldn't have the consequence-free sex.
Well, see, birth control.
We're understanding. If we go back to Plato, we really are making the case that these bad ideas were perennial bad ideas, right? And we needed to have some kind of technical innovation to make the bad ideas plausibly sustainable.
I'm not so sure of this because people who want this stuff bad enough, we could have had an abortion-based sexual revolution instead of a birth control-based one. I think that's
well, we did. It was called the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire. Right. Yeah, we don't need the birth control pill for it. The Romans had it. They just had abortions and infanticide to make up for it.
Well, isn't that the whole illusion in the first place, this idea that progressives are creating the future out of nothing, and the conservatives are looking to the past? No, everybody's making the future out of the past. It's just the progressives are going further back. They skip over the Middle Ages as if it's some dark, terrible part of human history. And then they go back to the classical area and the Roman area, and you got abortion, you got infanticide, you got euthanasia, you got all of this stuff.
I wonder, though, I mean, you know, I think that the sexual revolution certainly wouldn't have been, you know, people would not have recognized the sexual revolution as like their society in the Roman Empire.
I actually have to disagree. I don't think the progressives were really looking to the Romans. I don't know if there's actually evidence for them doing that, but I don't think it's them looking back all that far. I think it's just them. I think progressives were just they certainly are influenced by Marxism, definitely modern progressives, but I think it was just more them being influenced by kind of post-Christian ideas. You know, they're influenced by Hegel.
Well, what about the idea of the sexual revolution as being not necessarily progressive, but as being liberal, as in a means of focusing on the individual? You know, we talk about self-liberation, you know, self-discovery, but the idea, because when you think about it, when we talk about birth control or talk about abortion, it's always framed in individual rights, at least in our culture. It always goes back to, like, woman has control over her body, or she should have freedom to make decisions about her own life, or the man should have freedom to make decisions about his life. It really goes back down to the individual. So we could say, sort of like in the roundabout way, you know, whether that's you pin that on the Enlightenment or pin that on the Reformation, it really goes back to the individuals being the source of morality.
Well, I mean, I think a problem with that would be, you know, if you accept that, you know, an unborn child is a human being and that's deserving of rights, then you can still be a liberal and be pro-life in that sense, you know.
True.
I think it might be just more. Go ahead.
That's my position. I believe in rights, whether you guys do or not. Not in the same ones Brady Frieden claims, but in rights being God-given, but like the Declaration of Independence says.
Right. Well, what you believe in is natural law.
Yes, and and a form of natural law that includes or involves rights.
I mean, I just had a quick thought again back on to what Sanders said, is that you know, with the idea that I think then the sexual revolution or abortion is progressive in the sense that maybe it's, you know, yeah, an unborn child should have rights, but, you know, women's rights are more important than that. And that's definitely a progressive thought, isn't it?
The idea of tiered rights.
Yeah.
Yeah, that gets you sort of the more Hegelian things. Todd, you had a comment?
Yeah, as far as just one clarification, then a statement. It's not that I'm saying that the liberals were channeling ancient Rome for their sexual revolution, but what I'm saying is that, one, the pill was certainly very convenient, but you don't need the pill to have a sexual revolution. And second of all, you could have had the technology for the pill, but without the cultural amenity to use it, it just wouldn't have been used. And that's where Kinsey comes in to make people inclined to use it. So when it is available, because Kinsey wrote this stuff before the pill came out. But as to the point that I was going to make, though, was sexual freedom. In the preface to Brave New World by Aldous Huxley, he says this about sex in the Sexual Revolution, and it's very interesting. Nor does the sexual promiscuity of Brave New World seem so very distant. There are already certain American cities in which the number of divorces is equal to the number of marriages. In a few years, no doubt, marriage licenses will be sold like dog licenses, good for a period of 12 months with no law against changing dogs or keeping more than one animal at a time. As political and economic freedom diminishes, sexual freedom tends to correspondingly increase. And the dictator, unless he needs cannon fodder and families with which to colonize empty or conquered territories, will do well to encourage that freedom. And so the point is, the sexual freedom is an illusion. It's a form of control. And that was what the Rockefellers were paying for when
we weren't discussing what the sexual revolution was. We were just speculating about the causes. And one of the detractions I have is that if you're right and you could have an essentially abortion-driven sexual revolution.
The robot's back.
Yeah, so I'm trying to move my microphone here. I don't know how to fix this right now, guys. Is this better?
No.
Yeah,
okay.
we just...
Well, let's see. I can try to get back into the chat, but I was just I'll try to see if this comes through. If that were true, then we would see sexual revolutions occurring in societies outside of the West or in other remote societies.
Hi, Payton.
Yo. Well, not necessarily. I mean, if they have the cultural
logging
value...
in, logging off again.
Hey, it fixed.
I'm saying is if they have the cultural values that would
He's gone, we can party!
Woo!
Yeah!
Revolution!
Oh, wait. Oh, that's a dirty word here.
Join me.
No, but the point that I'm getting at is that the culture is what's important. You don't need to have the birth control pill. Ancient Greece and Rome had sexual practices that were just as degenerate as we have today.
Yeah, I think that this researcher guy you're talking about, though, I think he was giving academia the sort of thing academia wanted at that time, though. I don't think it was out of the blue this research comes along and then, I think that...
Well, no, there were people that wanted it. I mean, the Rockefellers very carefully paid for this guy because they wanted to... Well, why did they pay for it? Because they wanted to use his quote-unquote scientific data to manipulate and control people.
Right, but because this was already wanted, it can't be an ultimate sort of cause that makes the sexual revolution period different from previous periods of history.
Well, I didn't say that was the ultimate cause. It was the proximate cause.
But... Okay, well, we're looking for the ultimate cause that made the sexual revolution different from the other periods of history, different from the 19th century, for example.
If you want the modern iteration, it's technology. Absolutely.
Todd's argument was an attempt to debunk that by saying that the Romans managed to have a sexual revolution without a corresponding technological innovation to cause it. So
he was talking about the philosophical consequences of it.
Or they were just having a lot of unwanted, or they were just having a lot of babies out of wedlock.
I would actually debate whether Rome had a sexual revolution to the extent that we do now. When we see the decadence of Rome, we're predominantly talking about the elites. Most of the other people in the society would have had more or less traditionalist arrangements.
Yeah.
Well, I would argue it's different in degrees, certainly, but Tertullian said that the Roman woman 600 years ago, from his point in time, would have considered divorce unthinkable. But then he said in his own day, the Roman Empire, divorce was the natural result of marriage.
I still think he was talking about the elites and the upper middle class.
I was about to say, what kind of people was he hanging out with?
I mean, think about Augustine, think about Augustus's, moral or social reforms. He outright banned divorce, I think he outlawed adultery.
Yes. Well, for women, but the men could do it with impunity, pretty much.
Oh, you're a feminist now, aren't you?
Well, if we're going back to the subject of the pill, maybe
Todd just took a women's studies class.
Well,
hey!
Well, no, I had to go there, guys. Sorry.
Even a stopped clock is right twice a day, and I think at that time it was definitely patriarchal clock in the Roman Empire.
Even when the clock is screaming rape all the time.
Well, but going back to the pill and whether whatever Rome had was a sexual revolution or not in the same extent ours was. I mean, what the difference was is that, of course, you'll have men throughout history that are promiscuous and do it, but it's the pill, of course, was the one that gave women the ability to be as promiscuous as men and not have the consequences of pregnancy. And I think that's probably what made our sexual revolution much more greater in degree as compared to, say, what other civilizations tend to do, such as the Romans or those that had similar situations in their time prior to the invention of the pill. I think that's what we're really getting at.
Well, let me rephrase it. Okay, there were successful revolutions before, but they were never as successful as ours because of technology. People tried it before, but technology made it work.
We can all agree with that.
I think that's fairly reasonable.
I think it's both technology, but I think hand in hand with that is the kind of bringing is the mass culture. You know, I mean, like I agree with the fact that probably a lot of the Roman promiscuity was very much tied to the upper and middle classes, whereas now all this stuff has been brought to everyone.
There's enough. Hello, everyone. Knight Errantry here.
Hello.
Enough.
We'll try and call you that this time.
That's fine. Payton's fine too. There's enough court records, according to the historian Christopher Dawson, that we know that this started with the upper class, but it did trickle down to the lower classes. I would add also that sexual revolutions usually take place in the phase of empire. Now, something that I think could be pointed out is that essentially what empire is it's the death stage of civilization. It's the golden years for a reason. It's when the old man is in his 70s and 80s graying and he can finally reap it all, but he's about to die. And there's a reason for that, and it's because you have a lot of material prosperity, and so what happens, you're not focusing on surviving as much, and you have all this stuff around you, and your spiritual ethic you aren't just concerned with spiritual things anymore. So what are you going to do? You're going to have sex. You're going to have a lot of it, and you're going to look at ways to justify it. I don't think that it's a mistake if you're talking about the meta-narrative, if you will, that the sexual revolution took place after World War II, and when, basically the United States really was in its ascendancy when this thing was ironed out.
I think anytime we talk about America as an empire, I want to start playing Fortunate Son with footage of Vietnam.
Oh yeah.
Well,
that would be an amazing theme song for the counter-sexual revolution.
It ain't me. I don't know
agree
that
with Payton,
song, so I'd have to look it up later.
To agree with Payton, that kind of theory was expressed in H.P. Lovecraft's novel The Mound. This ancient alien race had reached the height of its power, and it lived underground. And when they pretty much did everything they could do, they just bored themselves with games and sex and pleasure. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of a common cycle and theme in history.
Yep. And I mean, it's happened before too, even in older empires.
So what our conclusion here is that it was technology which made the difference that made this particular sexual revolution so much bigger than all the previous ones we know about. But there would have been some kind of sexual revolution anyway without the pill, simply because the United States was becoming a decadent empire.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah.
I don't know about that.
That's a pretty advanced theory to be so unanimously pushing back on this.
Could you hash out the topic one more time, Data?
So the topic we're discussing is the culture war. Have people who are more traditional in perspective lost is the first question. The second question is, what is our current culture? What could characterize it? And where is sort of the culture war going to crest and come to, like, a dispensation that can be understood as stable, right? And then the third question is obviously the famous, what do we do about it, what should be done about it? And I guess if we're so conclusive on this one, I guess how do you characterize where we are now would be the next question.
Well, I think that the center will not hold, that the consequences of this the sexual revolution are going to come crashing down on the elites.
Before we start prognosticating on its demise, where is this going to end, right? Because right now we are we're in a place where I think people are considering sort of a new normal forming, right?
Well, we're seeing a lot of this with progressives is that they're already starting to eat themselves. Like, for example, I don't remember which university it was. It was, I want to say Nottingham, but I don't think it was. But there was a student union at a university in the United Kingdom that basically they issued, I think, a declaration or something like that that included in there that we've now reached the point where homosexual men are no longer oppressed. And basically,
homosexual white men are not oppressed.
Okay, was specific. Okay, homosexual white men are not oppressed and are. I want to say they said that they are aiding in the oppression now. But
yes, I think they said that.
I think there's a certain British man that's been causing trouble that might be the cause for this. But I think what I was going to say is I think there might also be a split because, I mean, with feminism you have sex negative and sex positive feminists. I mean, you have, a perfect example of the split would be like Anita Sarkeesian versus Lacey Green. Anita Sarkeesian seems like she's horrified at the idea of sex. She wants everyone covered up. She wants everyone wearing a burqa. Whereas Lacey Green is, wants everyone to have as much sex as they possibly can.
And it is strange that those two feminists, they coexist in close proximity to each other, and they seem to have relatively little conflict. I'll welcome Anarcho Rain to the chat, just in case, just to update you, Anarcho, we're talking about the culture war and where our culture currently is. Todd, did you have something to say?
Yeah, as far as the second question, what is the new dispensation on sex and culture?
Yes.
I think ultimately, whether the left realizes it or not, the end game is the kind of Hobbesian sexual war of all against all, as the Marquis de Sade points out, is in the philosophy of the bedroom, which is his.
But you guys don't think that there's going to be any stability? I mean, I know that we're going to get into prognostications that this is all going to fall apart.
I have a thing to. I don't really think we discussed enough about why. I mean, we just really only discussed the sexual revolution. I mean, there has to be other stuff with the culture war. We really only kind of very briefly touched on, how conservatives lost the culture war, and I think it's more than just the sexual revolution, right?
Yeah, there was also, I guess there was a number of things, right? There was multiculturalism, there was
secularism.
Secularism. Yeah. You could see this as sort of distinct from the. I think multiculturalism in particular could be seen as distinct from the sexual revolution. I think that the sort of, and that would be something that should be discussed separately, right? What's our opinions on multiculturalism? Why did it come about? And it was a big part of the culture war as well.
Well, if you're going to ask why we lost, the main reason is the left attacked us on a front that we were not prepared to defend. We weren't even aware we were being attacked there.
Which front would you say?
Be specific.
Well, it's this kind of like background subversion. If you look at people like, who was that guy that we did in our second video together, Dave? It was that leftist agitator. We picked apart his arguments.
Yeah, it was his name's Alex.
Sal Alinsky. Yeah, we were being attacked at this very subtle level that we didn't really realize until recently. That's what they were doing.
But Sal Alinsky, he's a rehash of Machiavelli.
No, that's what I'm saying though. I'm not saying he started it, but that line of attack that's been going on for. The conservatives have been largely blind to.
Sal Alinsky was distinct only in that he elucidated tactics. He didn't. He wasn't himself.
He's not saying Saul Alinsky himself did this. He's saying the tactics that Saul Alinsky described did.
Yeah, we weren't aware we were being attacked on that front, and by the time we realized it was too late. They'd already made so many gains on that front that by the time we realized that it was too late to stop the overflow.
Sorry, exactly what front was this?
Well, basically what happens is conservatives, and the difference between conservatives and liberals is conservatives have a job and we usually have to go back to work. Progressives get paid to be agitators for like their whole life. And so what happens is, for instance, the attack on the family was the authoritarian personality by Horkheimer and Adorno. Like, when you hear like fathers are fascist and family is fascism, I mean, it comes from Horkheimer and Adorno. But no conservative really knows this. when the left throws it at them, they have no idea where it's coming from, but that's where it comes from.
But that doesn't explain why it succeeded, though.
Well, I think the reason why it succeeded is, look, if you have two people fighting and you attack them on a front they're not defending, by default, that front's going to be broken. And if you're not defending it, they're just going to break right through it. And there were certain fronts we weren't defending because we didn't know we were being attacked there. It's like if two armies are fighting.
Fritz, you had something to say, and then I have to get to Matt.
Yeah, well, I was just going to say is, like, I think, again, one of the things I was going to say is that I kind of agree with Todd on part of this, but I think a bigger problem was the response was by the Christians especially has been horribly kind of misguided or miscalculated. I mean, the types of, like, kind of counter-culture media we produced has been just absolute schlock, you know?
Yes.
You know, the God's not dead and everything. And it's like, it's gotten to the point where, like, Christian movies are now just are just subject to ridicule. They had the opposite effect of what they were intended to do. You know.
Well, they were going to be ridiculed in any way because.
I mean, if they were
still, we made them so bad that you couldn't help but ridicule them.
I mean, you know,
it's fair to point out that very few people mocked the Bells of St. Mary or Archbishop Fulton Sheen in the 50s.
Well, that's because that was when we were.
Or Lord of the Rings.
Well, no, but the other ones have the Fulton Sheen and Bells of St. Mary's were explicitly Christian and explicitly proselytizing. You know, so that's what sets them aside as being surprising to not being mocked.
I mean, also, you know, ones that are just directly kind of biblical ones. Like, have you guys heard of the movie Risen that was made this year?
I've heard some good things about it compared to other Christian movies.
I mean, it's really good compared to most Christian movies because it's just about, like, that period, and it seems like when they're just kind of about the Bible or when they're about, like, that time period, that tended to be significantly better than ones that are trying to be hip and modern and completely fail in every way.
Jonathan, did you have something to say about that?
Yeah, I think when you're talking about Christianity and media and something, I think that Christians made a mistake of mistaking prudery for prudence. The Bible is full of blood and gore, heroic stories, and this idea of the Christian lady clutching her purse, it's there for a reason. I think Tolkien got around this to a large extent by, you know, telling the story and hiding it, because this, I think by a large point in time, the idea of consuming Christian stories, Christian fiction, any of these other types of things, were already on the downslide by the time that he was writing about this. I mean, this is what C.S. Lewis and Tolkien were talking about in the first place.
So, Todd, did you have a response to that?
Well, yeah, I'm going to say, okay, why did I think the ultimate reason why the conservatives lost the culture war was because they didn't identify the core values of progressivism and then systematically destroy them. For instance, when I was at college, and I would argue with people over particular disagreements like, you know, I don't know, women in the clergy, gay marriage, whatever, I realized it didn't get very far. Once I realized that if you look at the problem is not the gay marriage. The problem is prior philosophical assumptions. But everything is downstream of philosophy.
I have to push back on this, right? Because when the progressivism that eventually won the culture war was very different than the progressivism that had existed up until that point. So it's very hard to blame people for anticipating a movement that hadn't arrived yet.
Well, hold on a second. I'll get to that in a moment. But what I'm saying is, when you actually, you know, cutting off the branches of a tree won't kill it, but killing it at the roots will. And so we need to identify the roots of the belief core system of our opposition, and then destroy the core beliefs of that opposition. And we haven't even been looking or trying to do that. So it's not about predicting the future. It's just about, if you have an enemy, what's his core beliefs, demolish them on an intellectual, philosophical level, and then the rest of the whole tree will wither when you kill the roots. But we don't have that strategy.
This gets to a core problem, is I don't think that the intellectual is the core of the tree.
Well, again, I think I agree. I have to agree with Data that you know, it's not the arguments that win that'll win the culture war. It's going to be a narrative.
At this point,
you know, we can have as many debates as we want.
That ship has already sailed. And the reason why conservatives lost in the first place is, well, I'm sure some people find him to be contemptible. I think Vox Day has some wisdom, is that conservatism, as it is in America, is just an out-in-front loser. As what in Russell Kirk, as he did in The Conservative Mind, when he says, conservatism is not an ideology. We do not assert something. We don't. It's just this ephemeral thing. Whereas the left, it gives you this is what's wrong, and these are the systems with which we can prove it, but we can't. But conservatives, I'm using that we loosely, can't. And so while I'm sure there's some disagreements to this, I'd say you'd be hard-pressed to find evidence that it's wrong. Part of this is that this is just, again, this is a part of the cycle of the United States. And also the reasons why conservatives had a hard time pushing back is because it's just liberalism of an older kind. That's why I harp on this all the time, because it's just the same first principles.
Well, actually, Peyton, real quick, I'd agree with you. Have you read Robert Louis Dabney, The Shadow of Liberalism?
Hold on, I'd like to address this whenever we get a minute.
Sure, Ben, go ahead.
Okay, well, I was going to say I've read.
Go ahead, Ben.
I've read Russell Kirk, The Conservative Mind. I even had a video in which I quoted from it, and I think that there's a lot of great insight in Russell Kirk. But I should point out that conservatism in America meant something different at the time he wrote versus after.
By pre-fusionist conservatism.
Yeah, he was writing about pre-fusionist conservatism. Fusionist conservatism actually did have a system and an ideology and so on.
Can you clarify what fusionist and pre-fusionist is for people who might not know?
Right. Well,
fusionism is the idea that you can. It developed in the early Cold War America, largely to the efforts of Bill Buckley and others around National Review.
And I'm a fusionist conservative myself.
We need some fusionists because I think a lot of us are not. Well, I used to be. But what a fusionist is basically you take social conservatism and you take classical liberal economics, libertarian economics, and you take, and for the most part, a hawkish foreign policy. You take that together and you use that to sort of create a united front against New Deal liberalism and international communism. Now, as an electoral alliance, this sort of worked during the Cold War, but as we've seen, it's sort of fallen apart within recent years.
Yeah, it's fallen apart now.
Well, all right, it's not. I mean, the Reagan coalition, it's not fallen apart so much as in been completely destroyed and demolished and nuked.
Well, because you have people who previously paid lip service to types like Reagan, just seem to completely abandon that, at least notions that are traditionally associated with Reagan and fusionism. So, I mean, within the right, the chasm is between like old school true believer fusionists and the more populistic, for lack of a better word, nativists, nationalists, and similar sort. Trump, which I'm kind of reluctant to put an ideological label on Trump himself.
My God.
His supporters, Trump supporters, put it that way. That's what we've seen.
Yeah.
So fusionism in and of itself is dying, if not dead, as a
political coalition.
As a political coalition.
As a doctrine, of course, doctrines never die. But as a political coalition, fusionism, this is gone and is gone this year.
Yeah, this is the death year of fusionism. That's absolutely true.
Last year it was still a thing. Last election it was still a thing. This time it's gone because Trump.
Yeah. Trump is if that's how you define fusionism, Trump is the Buckley Slayer.
That's the one reason why I like him.
I would argue fusionism was doomed to fail because the corporations were the ones funding the sexual revolution with Kinsey and all the other guys.
I have to. This is the perfect chance to introduce this. How much did the free market encourage this? Right? You said something about corporations, right?
Yeah, pretty much like full throttle.
It sped it up definitely because I mean I'll put it this way: is that when you have more people going from their farms and moving to the cities, they don't have access to their own property. They're not working on their own property. They have to go out and work. Well, because in large of these places, you're at the mercy of whoever gives you a job. You know, usually you had very poor pay. You're practically a wage slave to them, and so every member of the family usually ends up working. So you have the beginnings of these, maybe if not the sexual revolution, at least the decline of the family. Yes. And then you have in recent years corporations that detect these cultural trends and they try to cash in on them, such as with the sexual revolution, and they finance it. Like, for example, it was not in, okay, I think I could say this. I live in Georgia, and we've had this huge, just recently, this huge fight over, our own version of a religious liberty bill. Basically, what killed it was not the Democrats, it wasn't the progressives per se, directly. It was Coca-Cola, it was Home Depot, it was all these Atlanta-based corporations that put pressure on the governor to veto it.
I just say it's been amazing how much in the last 5 years the explicit view of corporate entities has switched from a quasi-conservative side to an explicitly progressive one.
Well, but they were always progressive. I mean, they were the ones funding it.
Well, who bailed out the big corporations? Was it a Democrat or a Republican president?
Well, it was a Republican president with a Democratic Congress. It was both.
Well, but not only that, they were always progressive. I mean, back in the 50s, they were the ones funding the sexual revolution. I mean, Gloria Steinem worked for the CIA and was funded by corporations as well.
Yes,
that would answer a lot.
And that's also the fact that George Orwell, the socialist, was also funded by the CIA to produce Animal Farm.
The
cartoon.
Well, not only that, in Brave New World, it's a corporate consumer society based on extreme sexual gratification.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's the whole
William F. Buckley was ex-CIA.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
You mean he was employed by them for one day? Let's not. I'm not trying to cut some more heads into conspiracy theories. Anarcho, did you have something to say?
Yes, I do. First of all, can anyone hear me all right?
Yeah, you're coming in fine.
Yes. Yeah, you're good.
All right, excellent. So yeah, what we brought up in the chat was the topic of the teenager.
Yeah.
And this is sort of referring to back in the olden days, how there was no real notion of a teenager, and you would go from basically like child to like young adult, and you would adopt a wide amount of responsibilities. Now we basically, even in college, we reinforce things like safe spaces and whatnot to basically create this very coddled adult that doesn't really know how to deal with the real world in a way that back in the old days. Sorry, I'm a bit nervous, but what I'm basically trying to bring up is that the teenager is just one way in which the larger system of capitalism plays to the worst, to some of our most basic desires, basically for the ultimate end of profit. And I think other people have something else they would like to add to that better than I can.
What do you mean by capitalism? Sure. Absolutely clear.
Well, I actually can make. Go ahead.
Can I ask a clarifying point?
Absolutely.
Marco, just can you clarify before other people come in and respond? Can you clarify exactly what you mean by capitalism?
Okay, yes. So by capitalism, I define it as the ownership of the means of production, which includes factories, farms, mines, and as well as banks, and I would even include cultural centers like the media, basically. And it would be ownership by a small group of individuals where the people who actually put their work into the company are divorced from their labor. That's how I would define capitalism.
So corporate capitalism might be a little better in that sense.
What's interesting?
You're using the Marxist definition of capitalism, in other words.
Right, but it's true. I mean, the thing of it is, as Chesterton points this out, is that no matter if you're starting out with just, capitalism just per se, we're just going to have all this ownership and blah, 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 and no, it's about how much you can get together in corporations, you're going to get this eventually. It always happens. Like, you can't point to an example after the industrial era that this doesn't happen. It just does happen.
And can I add just one thing to that? I would actually argue that whatever remark they make about capitalism, that replies just as much, actually a lot more so, to their systems. Like what you see in industrial capitalism, you see the worst in a Marxist government, where we're talking about the ecology, exploitation of labor, the whole thing.
It's really amazing, isn't it, how Coca-Cola and the car company and Ford managed to create an entirely new phase of life. the teenager. I mean, that's very true. Has anybody seen the it's an old documentary, but I'm sure a lot of people have seen it. It was I think it was on PBS or something. It was called Consuming Cool or Making Cool.
It sounds familiar.
Yeah. Are you sure that isn't just responding to market forces, though? I mean, large part of the rise of the teenager is due to, post World War II, people wanted their kids to have a softer life. I
can actually add a lot to this because I remember one of the courses I took in college last year was basically the entire course was American history post World War II. And we read a whole bunch. One of the textbooks had huge amounts of like first-hand documents or primary source documents, and one of them was entirely on the idea of the teenager. The fact, like, it was corporate research, it was market research on the teenager. The fact that they were going to be growing up as some, the wealthiest generation in history. They were going to have massive amounts of spending money. Their parents were going to be spending lavish amounts of money on them. They were doing lots of detailed research on this.
Fritz, but doesn't that complement what Jonathan was saying about this being sort of a response to a market force?
Oh, no, I agree with that. I absolutely agree with that. It was, because, the massive the post-war economic boom was definitely contributed to the fact that people are now able to do this. Teenagers didn't have to work now.
Have any of you watched Millennial Woes' his videos about Rotherham, in particular the one where he talks about basically the decline of the British Empire, and when it was for certain that American ascendancy, i.e. the Suez Canal crisis, that it's like, no, you are no longer the world power, Britain, but the United States is.
I will confess that Millennial Woes is a guilty pleasure of mine, despite being an opponent of the alt-right.
There's nothing guilty about it. There's nothing guilty about it. He's wise in some way.
But I'll say...
Although I think
sorry. Let me finish the thought. I agree with his analysis, and that one in particular. Another person who brings this up was Peter Hitchens. He points to the very same moment.
I love Peter Hitchens.
Ooh, yes.
He points
Morality
to the very same
man.
moment in his book, The Rage Against God, as being a turning point when Britain turned away from an imperial ambition and towards a consumeristic one.
And this is also what's interesting about the United States, is that from the very outset after World War II, its empire was based upon consumerism, which is why you had these natural trends. So, I mean, if for myself, if I can preeminently answer your question, I don't think the sexual revolution is going to go away until the police that's made it goes away. That's my bold prediction.
Probably.
All ye men weep. Look upon your false god of liberty and know that she has betrayed you.
Babylon is fallen.
Hold on here. Wait a minute.
I'm not yet ready to bury liberalism. Ben,
I am. I'm definitely ready.
Yeah, well, several things about that have kind of stacked up. What were you saying about the British Empire? What caused the decline of the British Empire? What?
Well, it wasn't anything about the cause. It's merely that it was illustrative of that. It was around this time that the British Empire was sunsetting, essentially. That you have these same, these same movements of the rise of the teenager as a consumer, the rise of the first, basically, pinings of the sexual revolution, and of America's ascendancy as qua empire. That you start all of this happening. That it's basically, these are all indicators and signposts, basically, that point to this, as Walker Percy would say.
That's an interesting point, but I think, though, I mean, we can speculate about that economically, but I think we were also talking, since Millennial Woes and Peter Hitchens came up, this is a good segue, about the role that multiculturalism also played in this transformation.
Here's the thing about multiculturalism. I think that it is ultimately a kind of excuse that is sort of covering up the sexual revolution and the new ethic. I don't think it's a cause. I think it's an effect of that. And the thing is, they never actually promote anything really important about any other culture ever.
Well, I think in their eyes, all culture is equal.
Except white Western civilization.
Yeah, that's evil and terrible.
It's always crap that has nothing to do with what's really important about any of the cultures that they're trying to promote. I mean, just look at.
You certainly aren't reading the Analects of Confucius and the ancient Indian Vedas in your multiculturalism class.
You get
sort of Marxistic.
You get white college girls getting tattoo of honor on their back or whatever.
Hey, ho ho! Western Civ has got to go. Hey, ho ho! Has anyone actually heard that chanted on a campus?
Yeah, I've heard it from the videos when they say Milo has got to go.
Milo is Western civilization.
God help us all if he is.
Milo is what has happened to Western civilization.
What are you talking
about? It's fabulous.
Milo Yiannopoulos is the greatest homosexual warrior since Alexander the Great.
Ooh.
He shall enter the temple as Alexander did and bring us out of captivity. I'm obviously kidding. Anyway, but
Ptolemy the First was better.
Oh.
Have you ever read James Rom's book Ghost on the Throne?
Later, Fritz. Later, we'll do this later, and then
Let's
I'll
go
run
back
you
to
through.
Sexual Revolution.
So what I was saying was what I was trying to segue in with there is that with multiculturalism, and this is a very sensitive topic, but we have Black Athena, and the entire.
Are you referring to the book or some other concept?
No, there's the book, the concept, the book, and basically the general theory that was essentially that the ancient Egyptians were actually black, and that Western civilization is actually based upon a Afro-Oriental civilization.
We was Kangs.
Yes, and the thing of it is what people don't realize is that after Martin Luther King, and even spearheaded by Jesse Jackson, people don't realize that Jesse Jackson actually believes this. He doesn't talk about it, but he does believe this.
That's true.
And many of the major so-called quote-unquote civil rights leaders of today will tell you that they believe this. And go ahead.
Matt, okay, after you, Sanders, Matt can go.
I'll make this real quick. Just to give you an example of what Payne's talking about. Do you all remember when National Geographic, this was quite a few years ago, they came out with this special issue saying that they supposedly reconstructed the face of Tutankhamun through modern technology?
That was about 5 or 6 years ago, I believe, yes?
Yeah, something like that. And then you had all this outrage from these quote-unquote civil rights leaders saying, like, oh, he wasn't black enough. And somehow they were trying to remove any blackness from Egyptian civilization or King Tut or whatever. So,
I remember that got damped down a bunch, though. That definitely didn't become like a Terry Schiavo type controversy.
No, I mean it was there and then was gone, but it showed that those ideas are still prevalent or floating around.
The gentleman, if I can call him a gentleman, who shot those police officers a few weeks ago was actually one of these types. He was a hotep. People don't realize that. But I mean, and so like how multiculturalism, with the way that we've lost the culture wars, is that, and again, like I keep saying, this is not a bug, it's a feature of our civilization in the way that it was constructed. It's just happened faster because of the way it was made back in the day, in the 1770s. But the reason why multiculturalism even happened was because you had the time when we're moving also to a consumer culture. It's that when we're thinking we're losing our spiritual roots, which leads for people to, rather than look to Christian civilization and to what one could term classical Christian learning, and in a way the religion of the United States lends itself to this, quite frankly, then of course you're going to have these things that saying that we don't need this stuff anymore, that it's just bad. Not to mention just the fact that you had the more unsavory elements of the civil rights movement, but I can't say that or else I'm racist.
Well, no, you're part non-white. You're fine.
Yeah, you're fine.
That's true. I do have.
I'm talking about the Irish part, though.
Oh, gouch sentimentality and senseless violence strikes again.
Well, define the religion of the United States.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, overall, the non-confessional, basically the pan-Protestant identity that's non-confessional, and I'm not including Anglicanism in this by all means. What I mean, or even like old world Protestantism.
Right, so this is a Catholic saying that the sexual revolution and the breakdown of our society is the fault of the Protestant Reformation. That's what this is at the bottom line.
Well, I mean, honestly, if you wanted to unpack anything I'd have to say, I would say yes, of course. But that's because you know. to be quite frank.
Didn't I already apologize for this?
Yeah, but see, it would have been much shorter to just say that.
This chat is a majority Protestant. If he's actually saying that, I can't believe he's getting.
Who here is Catholic?
Pushback.
Who here is Catholic?
I think it's me, Errantry, and anyone else.
No, I was going to say the pushback hasn't really started yet because nobody had figured out that that was really the bottom line of his argument until I said it.
Well, I mean,
Chroma, did you have anything to say?
I guess not. I just say Matt has been waiting in line for about 15 minutes.
Oh yeah, he.
Give the floor to Matt.
No problem. I guess I just want to say for the first topic and in multiculturalism, you can tie it up neatly. I mean, what I wanted to say is I think multiculturalism is happening now much stronger and harder than I think that it had been in the past, is a combination of greater technology allowing to see some of the excesses of our imperialism that other people probably didn't have access to back in the day. And that also led to basically people distrusting their institutions. So hyper-capitalism, colonialism, you hear the progressives harp on about that very often, things like that. So it allowed a narrative to be painted about our core institutions as faulty or bad. And so it gets this kickback where people say, okay, who have we wronged? And now you have this imperial guilt where people want to atone, I guess, is what people say is going on in Germany right now especially.
Yeah, hold on. I want to give a little bit of pushback to Payton. Somebody that comes from a church that had a period called the pornocracy shouldn't be pointing fingers at people for sexual deviancy.
Yes, but that's the problem. Is the thing of it is that what Protestantism did is it turned religion from into the public sphere in which religion, because this entire modern view of religion as something that belongs purely to the individual and isn't just merely a part of the tapestry of society. And at the bottom level, that's what lies at sola scriptura. That's what it will lead to, is you're going to have this idea that religion can ultimately become private, and that automatically will lead to liberalism, because you're not intentionally, obviously, you're desacralizing the world. Who was it? Was it Paul Tillich or some other Reformed theologian said that American Protestantism is Protestantism without Reformation? And I think, by and large, that's what he means by this. Now, obviously, I would assert that he doesn't understand that what's actually at the bottom of all of this I want to almost say timey-wimey wobbly kind of theological tradition. Oh, I love Doctor Who. Doctor Who is delightful, even though he's an atheist.
It makes me cringe. It really makes me cringe.
Okay, I will say this though. I'm just glad that they got back to an old guy rather than a sort of whimsical 26-year-old.
I love Matt Smith. Screw you.
I still liked David Tennant.
He wasn't bad, but never mind. Sorry, Payne. Go back to blaming Protestantism for everything.
Well, I mean, the thing of it is, though, obviously this is going to fall on deaf ears. I'm to the two secular people that might be listening to this, and this is really who I'm talking to. But what I would really say is that if you take a minute and you read William T. Kavanaugh's work about this stuff, and you actually give a second to look at what the essentially taking religion and turning it into a purely personal experience, give it a couple centuries of interpreting and then reinterpreting and then interpreting again, you're going to get essentially American liberalism. And you're going to get essentially what is a proposition culture that isn't going to have religion as basically one of its main, as an actual feature of the polis.
Well, to be fair, though, the idea of religion as a purely private experience was first concocted in the monasteries with certain mystics.
Thomas Kempis.
Right, but the thing of it is that was an idea of a vocation as a part of the society. It wasn't as an idea of that this was what would permeate society as a whole. And with the idea of the hermit, the mystic, the monastery, it was this is only for certain types of people with a certain vocation. And with the monastery, in fact, it was done in community, which is why, in fact, most of the Italian cities around Monte Cassino formed, was because they weren't completely against people from the quote-unquote profane world being around them. As a matter of fact, a lot of the time they brought all agriculture, and that's because ultimately your spiritual culture has got to be the center of the culture. You cannot have a mere proposition.
Well, this is very interesting. This is a little bit off topic, so let's just get back on topic.
Jonathan,
Dave,
you wanted
to get to multiculturalism, right?
Well,
I'll go first, and I'll jump back
Jonathan, really quickly, and then I'll get right back to multiculturalism.
I want to address this, please, whenever I can.
Okay, Jonathan, then we'll get
back
to the topic.
Cool. I think it's a little bit of revisionist history to think that Protestantism wasn't a part of the warp and woof of American culture, small-town American culture, agrarian, pre-move to the cities at the beginning of the 20th century. I mean, the church was the center of all activity, is when people met. That's where people held their political meetings. Go
ahead, and then if I could finish, and then if I may respond.
Well, yeah, and I guess that's basically all I just wanted to say. I just sounds slightly revisionist to me, and I understand that there's a lot of traditionalism in Catholicism that Protestantism lost, and I think that there would be a great leap for Protestantism to move back in that direction again. Look into the traditions, look into the scholastics and everything, and look into our root history as a kind of an ecumenical view going back. But this idea that the center of life of America wasn't the church, I don't know.
Well, can I add something real quick to Jonathan?
Sure thing.
To kind of add on his point, I mean, for the most part, with the exception of perhaps the Anabaptists, most of the Protestants tended to be magisterial. There was a sense of Christendom even among people like Luther, like Calvin. They definitely thought that the church should have been a part of culture. Now it may have been their church, but it wasn't completely. That idea of connecting state, society, the polis away from the church was not, at least in the beginning, not very Protestant. But most Protestants supported
Luther's
that
two kingdoms theory.
That wasn't a part of it. But what I'm saying is, it's an inevitable development. And that in the beginning of America, you did have that, but then again, you had happening because of these same features. It's not a feature. It's not a bug. It's a feature. You had the First Great Awakening, and then the Second Great Awakening, and the Third Great Awakening, and then now you have all of these different things. And what that does to the psyche of a religious person over time, what it does to the psyche of a religious culture over time, is it secularizes it. I mean, there's obviously other things there, but like what I'm saying is, it's when you have these propositions and when you essentially have competing narratives of Christian civilization, then you are, of course, going to get something like Black Athena and the We Was Kings movement eventually.
So what you're saying essentially is that because it was the structure was unstable because it kept on shifting back and forth from secular to non-secular foundations until it sort of collapsed in on itself.
Yeah, basically. But I mean, whether or not people
to this.
I've been waiting a while to address this.
Hold on, Mr. Sanders.
Ben has been waiting, so can you let him go?
Can I go after that?
Then I'll wait Todd.
I'll just try and just be real brief, but I was just going to point out that Latter-day Saintism tries to reconnect the polis with the religious, and
it does.
That's very important.
Oh, it does. That's
very
very
important to the movement, and so there is a rejection of sola scriptura, and there is a moving back in the direction of a reconnected religious experience for the community rather than just for the individual there. And I just wanted to point that out.
Well, this is, and I completely agree with that. It's something that I've often thought. The LDS is, it should be America's actual religion if it was to have one.
That, yeah.
I completely agree with it. And that, I mean, if we're looking at this from like a detached, I'm just a secular anthropologist thing, the LDS Church, Mormonism, is Protestantism's response to itself, and it's a damn stable one, to be quite frank.
Todd.
Yeah, Sanders brought up my people, the Anabaptists, but need I remind you of all the American churches, the Amish, the Mennonites, and the Hutterites are the least open to the sexual revolution. They're the ones that have resisted the depredations of modernity the best.
Yeah,
Yes.
but if you're closed to everything, then you'll be closed to, both the good and the bad.
The point that I'm making is to Payton, the idea that disassociating, privatizing the religion, if you want to call it that, I don't know if it's a adequate definition, but necessarily leads to this. No, it doesn't. The Amish are the most conservative people in the country, and they've resisted modernity better than anybody.
My response to that would be, is the reason why the Amish have been able to do that is essentially they did have an authority. They did basically decide this is the correct interpretation. We have decided upon a tradition, and this is what it is, and if you don't like it, tough. And so rather than interconnect with, I mean, there's other, I don't want to give a huge explanation of James Jacobs, but like there's other issues of what may lead to the Amish project, but I'm not going to do that right now.
So we're not going to do that. I'm going to circle to Fritz, and then I think Jonathan has another point he wants to expand upon.
Yeah, I think I was just going to say briefly, it seems like we're trying to just look for some sort of, we might just be trying to look for a smoking gun here. I mean, it almost seems like we're trying to find just one reason for why this happened. I think,
it's always Luther.
Yeah, I mean, it's got to be. It's a lot more complicated than that. I mean, you can't just say it was all because of Protestantism. Ultimately, I mean, yes, it might. You could argue there might be some influence, but I mean, that progressivism, the technology, it's just a multitude of reasons contributing to this.
And one more, I think, Jonathan, you had a reason for that, right?
Well, I think it comes back to this kind of more modern conception now of divorcing morality from the law. So if we live in a democracy,
that is bizarre, isn't it? Right?
Yeah, it is absolutely bizarre
all the time, and it's like, what does that even mean?
I mean, even Cicero.
What they mean is sex. That's what they mean when you hear atheists say that. That's usually what they're talking about.
And even actually, well, to say it right, Cicero. Said,
yeah, but if you said it right, then you'd be like, witty, Winnie, or whatever, right?
Witty, wiki.
Witty, wiki. Oh my god.
Always true to Caesar. But anyways,
terrible. Yeah,
what I was going to say is that even Cicero, he said the more laws, the less justice. Or actually, even better quote was by Edmund Burke, where he's like, morality is more important than law.
Right. Well, and
I like Burke.
Go ahead. Actually, I just had a brain fart.
Well, don't let Night Air know that, Ben.
When we talked about multiculturalism, which we're going to swing back to before we get on to the contemporary question, which we've been sort of avoiding. When I was thinking about multiculturalism, you guys all think that multiculturalism is due to something, but I think that a lot of the driving force behind the cultural war and the victories in the cultural war is the fact that when you have a lot of different people in a country, you could have Christian principles guide a country when almost everyone was Christian. But if there's essentially like a ton of cultures there, that doesn't make any sense anymore. So multiculturalism might be a driver. But so I'll hand this back to Matt if he wants to take multiculturalism, and then Todd, I think. Hello?
I'm good. I said basically what I was going to say. I mean, my biggest thinking from multiculturalism was not from basically like a single cause, but just a perception issue about how, institutions failed, people decided we screwed up, and so if we screwed up, who did we hurt? And, it's kind of like a guilt thing is what it's ultimately boiling down to from my perspective.
What do you mean by that? Can you elaborate on a guilt thing? By multiculturalism, I only mean just the existence of tons of very, very diverse cultures that are from everywhere, right? That couldn't conceivably organized. Do you mean like the more late social justice warrior type multiculturalism?
I thought that's what we were referring to since it was the culture war, and multiculturalism seems to be the big narrative being pushed. So I guess I got confused by your question.
Yeah, this is always the problem. There's multiple definitions. But yeah, in the sort of capital M multiculturalism, right, it's all based on historical guilt. But yeah, Todd, did you want to say something?
Yeah, you had asked, this is relating back to why we lost. Very clearly we lost due to multiculturalism. California was a red state. until we imported all these Mexicans. I mean, that's the main reason why we lost California as a red state. It used to be solidly conservative from, what, Eisenhower to Reagan?
I don't know, maybe not consistently, but it's much more of a swing state in some of those toward the end.
California, though, until Reagan, I think between Eisenhower and Reagan, California was pretty consistently red. Nixon got it.
I'm a California native, and it was essentially a swing state.
But toward the mid, after Nixon, kind of onward, it was a swing state.
See, I thought that the Reds
were the commies. All I know, but sorry.
And also, it also doesn't ideologically make sense to do these types of divisions going back before, say, 1970, because then the party lines weren't so ideologically divided along liberal and conservative lines. So it's very difficult to just do presidential analysis. Anarcho, did you have a point to bring up?
Yeah, I think I should also bring one more point into the call regarding multiculturalism as it applies more to the urban areas versus the small town and agrarian areas. Because the urban areas, as I'm sure all of you know, is where social conservative basically goes to die. And to tie it back into capitalism, which I find depends more and more on increasing urbanization, we see a greater amount of people basically forced into these basically human nests, I would describe them, where they have to mix with all sorts of cultures they otherwise would not, mix with people with all sorts of values they otherwise would not. Like, it's basically another way in which the system forces people to go along in their private lives with beliefs that are completely anathema to their daily living. That's what I would bring in.
And the urbanization, that's another good point, right? I mean, urbanization is sort of closely linked with this. I agree. I totally forget who wanted to talk. Anyone want to comment on that?
Well, I can jump in, because again, when we're talking about morality being divorced from the law, that's in large part due to this idea of multiculturalism. We can't thrust our values onto other people. But you can't have a coherent culture and a coherent society if everybody has different competing values. It's going to fall apart.
Well, the thing is, what you're going to be left with is just law. I'm convinced that the more when you have a multicultural state, you inevitably are going to have authoritarianism.
Peyton talked about this in a chat we had a few weeks ago, but somehow the only thing that really, in multicultural societies, the only thing that really binds people together is economics.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's I think, also an element of urbanism too, right? Mm-hmm. I haven't given up on forging some kind of traditional community in an urban area, but it's very difficult, right?
I think you could.
Yeah.
I mean, as distributists, you should be vehemently against the concept of the urban area.
No, not necessarily. That's a gross mischaracterization. Shame on you.
Okay, hold on a second, real quick. California was not a swing state from 1948 to 1988.
Todd, did you hear my thing about how any analysis before 1970 is immaterial when it comes to party lines, because the party lines before 1970 don't correspond to ideologically conservative.
Okay, well then from 1972 to 1988, it was a firmly red state.
So that's 2 elections. Okay, so it was in that
That's
period.
not 2. That's like 3 or 4.
Okay. So I've got a lot on my plate, but I think that there's certain things to be said about multiculturalism, like immigration populations coming in, and therefore sort of challenging previous, because America was built on almost like a racial identity before. Before sort of like the 60s in some ways, right? And I can see how immigration from other countries would challenge that. But yeah,
immigration is totally. If you don't have immigration, you're not going to have multiculturalism. I mean, look at Western Europe. Prior to the 20th century, there was virtually no non-white or non-native populations living there. Yeah. It's entirely in America. I mean, after around the 1920s, they passed. What was that law that was passed that basically stopped immigration from non-white countries? And that law was abolished in the 60s. Because essentially, essentially, I'm talking about America. But anyways, in America, in America, because there was this kind of emerging idea in the 20s, and then apparently after World War II or the early 50s, that all the different kind of groups, the different European ethnic groups in America had, the Italians, the Germans, the Irish, everybody else. They had pretty much kind of all assimilated and mixed together, and there was now just kind of one general American white identity, and you basically had that kind of help create a stable kind of American identity until you had more multiculturalism from other places.
Yeah, this ultimately leads me to believe that because I think Europe was very ethnically homogenous up until really the 80s or 90s, and it would be hard pressed. A very similar culture war death of traditionalism.
You would be hard pressed to find a black person in France prior to like the mid 20th century.
Not if you believe Tumblr.
Beethoven was a black man, right?
What?
I don't think that race is really all that relevant to issues of right and wrong, except insofar as it is exploited by the Marxists. Apart from its exploitation in that way, I don't think it matters at all. What matters is not race, but culture.
No, yeah. I think if I can answer that, I think really what's going on here is that we're not really. Race is sort of a proxy for culture in this sense, right? It's a cultural effect we're experiencing, and there's nothing necessarily that links race and culture together, but historically, race and culture are linked together, and so the emergence of multiculturalism could be a huge source of cultural change.
Yeah, but is that race or is that tribalism? I think that the American concept of race is very, very unique to us. I don't think it can be exported to the rest of the world, and we tend to have kind of a myopic view when we're talking about it.
Well, because Richard Spencer is very, very unhappy that you said that.
Okay.
If I could add something real quick to what Jonathan said.
I want to hear more about why is the American concept of race different. What?
No, go ahead.
Okay. I'm just looking at historically the concept of race, the concept of nation or whatever. I'm sorry, I'm taking the long arc of history again to find the origin of where our concept of race comes from.
Oh, I see. You're saying that because America was this new kind of nation, the ideological nation rather than the nation of tribe, that made America's idea of race completely different from ideas of race that existed previously.
No, I think you had tribes bumping into each other in the ancient world all the time or whatever, and these white people were different from these white people, and they were a different nation. They were your enemy. People weren't so focused as much on the color of the skin as to whether or not somebody was going to kill them or somebody was their friend. When we get to America, we've got hundreds of years of colonialism under our belt, and you have an actual active attempt to justify slavery in this country and to turn it into a good thing, and then all of a sudden this racial realism kind of pops in. I think it's a relatively new concept, but I think it's
more people trying to justify slavery. Are you talking about the 1800s or?
I'm talking about the 1800s, and then how that flows into Reconstruction and then Jim Crow, and that takes us right up to the 60s and the sexual revolution and everything else about it, and the rise of progressive, rise of liberalism, and this idea has been imported into our whole narrative.
Wait, and just add something real quick to Jonathan. What said regarding race, you also have to keep in mind is that. And I assume when we talk about race, we're talking about broad strokes, like white or black or
right, yeah,
as opposed to like ethnos, like you have like
right. No, ethnicity is real.
Ethnicity is very real.
Right.
But talk about race is that we talked about this before, like white nationalism and those sort of ideas, I think could have only arisen in a culture such as America, in part because of the the mixture of peoples, and you got to and the fact that you're right, what Ben was talking about, the national identity comes not from ethnos but from
Ethos.
ideology. What?
The American national identity comes not from ethnos but from ethos.
Yes. Okay. That's a pretty good summary. Just to make but
go ahead.
Racialism. See, racialism doesn't at least. Okay, I think I lost a train of thought. Never mind. But the whole point
Todd,
is,
did you want to come in and say something?
Yeah. The point with multiculturalism is between 1972 and 1988, 5 elections, the Republicans always won California. The reason why we've lost swing states, it wasn't even a swing state. We lost states like California was because of this immigration policy. And same in England, the Labour Party and the Democratic Party they revised the immigration codes of their countries to flood them with these third world immigrants so that they would vote for them in future elections.
Yeah, but how do you explain, for the most part, labor victories in the 40s and then even in the 60s? Like, immigration was picking up, but it wasn't. It hadn't picked up to 90s.
Workers issues.
The Labour Party gave up on labor issues in the 90s.
That was after the transformation you're talking about, though, right? I mean, if you're talking about the immigration timeout the United States had between 1920 and 1964, that was a period that was dominated by the political left. So the conspiracy theory doesn't really hold up because there's no reason for them to believe the immigration would be necessary for them to hold political office.
And you also got to keep in mind that labor at this time was, for the most part, listen, Euroscepticism in Britain did not originate from the right, but originated from the left. Like, Euroscepticism was, even up until the 80s, up until before it began to switch, it was a feature of the Labour Party platform to have a referendum on the issue of the European community. So, I could see why they might work with the Democrats, because the Democrats have always had, going back to the Irish and other groups that came into New York and other places, that the Democrats have always benefited from some level of immigration. I'm not sure if you could use that label. You use that same reasoning with the Labour Party up until before the 90s.
Folks, I think we're starting to wander very far afield from our original question. I think we should return to it.
I think we've pretty much covered all theories about the culture war being lost. So I think we should talk a little bit more about contemporary times in the future, which is sort of where I wanted to focus this in the going forward. So do you guys have any thought on what's going on right now before we talk about what is to be done and where the future is headed?
Well, I think like a lot of things, because of the pace of technology with the digital revolution, the culture war is only now it's accelerating. To think that ultimately, if we're going to say how do we plan to win or what should be done, it should be obviously re-engage with culture, you'd think that might be a Herculean task, but with the way culture works right now, with the speed at which it comes, the speed at which the speed and the outrage culture we have, the instant kind of reaction everyone has to something, to a hashtag, is that we should recognize that right now culture moves incredibly fast and is incredibly rapid. It is
interesting to see that it's accelerating. Which is
look at even the idea of a meme. A meme is kind of like a very, very tiny artifact of culture, right?
Thank you, Dawkins.
I've seen the future, and it is Pepe.
I know. But anyways, the point is, that what a meme is. But the thing is, the lifetime of a meme is so short. It becomes new, it becomes fresh, and then it becomes old within the space of only a couple of weeks now. And the thing is, whereas before, if we're going to talk about a work of culture, people would have been reading. People are still talking about Don Quixote for centuries, for hundreds and hundreds of years. But hello, this is Dog. No one cares about that anymore.
Well, we have our generation's work that will last. I think Harry Potter will probably be around for some time to come.
Maybe.
A slow groan of contempt. But I think I do think there's something to this weird acceleration we're experiencing, right? First of all, I have to say welcome to Nuo. Is that how you say it?
If this guy starts screaming at us, he seems normal. Can we please have Chroma say something? The numbers have been dropping, so we need more people to talk.
Chroma, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
All right, just make sure that everyone's on board. Okay, so Nuo, can you talk? No? Okay, maybe you should hide. Okay, well, let's continue on. So yeah, there is sort of an strange acceleration that's going on with just, you know, I mean, I work on a university campus, and it's hard to keep pace. But I get the sense that everybody is seeing this, right? Because I think that if you were in the 90s, you wouldn't have seen just the weird acceleration or sort of the radical stuff, but now it's just everywhere.
I think an astute observer in the 90s could have seen all of this coming.
But you don't need to be astute is the point.
You don't have to be astute anymore, but maybe in the 90s you had to be a little bit astute.
There was this great article by some British guy in the early 90s just saying, it's titled, "The Internet's going to change everyone's lives." Yeah, right.
Well, yeah, there's some ways in which the Internet's changed everyone's lives, but there are certain things about human nature that certainly persist, you know, through all of time. I think the interesting thing about predicting the future of culture is simply which sexual deviancy is going to be the next gay marriage.
Well, it's obviously trans now, right? Trans rights.
Will it what?
It's obviously the trans thing. That's the next
trans
thing.
is next.
But I think the exception of the trans. Sorry, I think. But with the trans thing, it's like the acceptance has gotten very, very. I mean, the thing is, do they have any real rights? I mean, the bathroom things, which is completely ridiculous. But I mean, aside from that, like, are there any rights they don't have? And the thing is, like, you know,
that's rights the way the left defines it most certainly.
Things they want. There will always be things that in all of these constituency groups want. They're never going to run out of those ever. And but the thing is, you know, well, trans is kind of already happening. I'm just kind of wondering, you know, will polygamy be a thing?
Certainly.
Or will it happen before polygamy?
I'm going to call it now. Okay. I mean, this may offend some people, but I'm going to call it now. Utah, give it 20, 30 years, the Utah Church will say the polygamy is reinstituted.
I wouldn't be too surprised.
See, we got to make that distinction since you're all the so
yeah.
I will say that. See, because real quick, not to get too far off, but the Utah Church has been kind of silently retreating on some of these issues, in the sense of like they've been like the Boy Scouts caved on the issue of having gay leaders and gay members.
Yes, and as an Eagle Scout, I am so enraged about that.
Yeah.
I am beyond enraged about that.
And then plus two, you have there were similar attempts in Utah to have sort of like a religious liberty bill or bills that would to similar effect, and the Utah Church put pressure on members of the Utah legislature to drop that. And all that to say is just to do real quick, because of the Utah Church's, I don't know, this goes back to a theological issue, the idea of continual revelation, and the way that it has been applied in the Utah Church, how they suddenly, God's no longer cool with polygamy anymore when statehood is around. I think that you will probably see within the next 20, 30 years, if polygamy becomes legal,
all of a sudden there will be a revelation or alleged revelation from the Brighamites that polygamy is okay again.
Yes.
Or even again.
Yeah, ironically, there's a problem, and this I think they can't take polygamy. It's almost impossible to get on board at this stage. And go ahead.
I was just going to say, how are you going to manage the rights between people? The divorce court would be another mess.
Exactly. It can't legally be sustained, and also they can't really swallow it culturally, right?
I mean,
just like when we're talking about the Progressive Coalition, right? I was talking to somebody, I forget who, and we agreed that the progressives would have to continuously throw off more groups, you know, off their like under the
the oppression mix hierarchy or the progressive stack, right?
Like white homosexual males.
Yeah, exactly. But he speculated that the next group to go would be white women. But I think that's impossible, right? Or if they did do it, it would be the stupidest thing the progressives ever did.
Because that's virtually 90% of the progressives.
Yeah, it would also consolidate a natural opponent of them in nationalism, right? The alt-right would immediately pick up the constituents, consolidate its flank, and be a force to be reckoned with instantly, right? So, so there's certain things politically that are infeasible, and I think that taking polygamy on board is one of them.
I give it 10 years.
I suppose.
Oh, you're a little less optimistic, or more, depending on your reasoning.
I mean, 10 years. Well,
I'm radical. Being RLDS, a traditional RLDS, I'm radically anti-polygamy. Just FYI.
Quick question, and then we get back to discussion. Are you actually a member of the Community of Christ, or are you a member of a different group?
The Restoration Branches movement that broke with the RLDS church hierarchy in the 1980s when the SJWs hijacked it.
Mm. Okay, sorry. Okay, back to what we. Yeah, who's next to be thrown off on the ion? So.
Oh, well, it does seem like they would need. I mean, I guess the question is exactly how many people could they put on the "we're oppressed" boat before it capsizes. The other thing is.
Do you think they'll ever ditch Muslims?
No.
Oh, no.
They, never.
That's the other group they can't throw on. They can toss.
That would take ideological consistency.
Why?
Because
they know that. Help them. Sorry, I was going to say the Muslims are going to help them accept polygamy, so of course they got to keep the Muslims.
Well, not just that. But I mean,
good point.
But I think the thing is, I think it's Data. You kind of made a point that it's because perhaps maybe it's that the progressives see that Islam is going to be a cultural force, is going to be a very large force in the future. They want to get into their good graces as much as possible. Yeah. Even though they're amongst. I mean, how else can you?
The progressive stack has nothing to do with ideology and everything to do with political expediency.
Yes. I mean, the thing is, how else?
There's certain it's the only way you can politically important. What?
I mean, it's the only way you can explain the fact that progressives, that tolerant. Focused feminists can support Islam.
Well, I think the other narrative that does it too is just the guilt narrative. Mm-hmm. You look back at all the havoc that's been wreaked in the Middle East recently, and
there's the Jew hating. Don't forget the Jew hating.
It makes kind of ridiculous. The whole I never made sense to me the Muslim guilt thing. I mean. Western countries have been involved in Middle Eastern wars, but if we talk about any broader scope of history, Muslim countries were imperialistic countries. They were not colonized.
Where did we learn colonialism from?
Yeah,
we learned it from them.
It doesn't make any sense in a larger context.
I mean, they enslaved huge amounts of black people. The only reason there isn't any trace of it now is because they castrated them all.
Yeah, to a large degree, and so I mean, Islam is an interesting creature because it's so foreign to how the Western mind conceives of political reality, and it's very clear at this point that progressives think that this is a very, very expedient new member in its coalition, and it's the most important one. If progressivism and Islam are oppositional, the progressive coalition will snap like that.
Okay. Well, who else? Who else can they get rid of? What about instead of actually accepting polygamy? What if they just actually went and agreed with the libertarians to get rid of marriage altogether as a legal construct?
At this point, I might support that.
I've considered it.
I mean, I still think marriage still has. I mean, I think ideally I would want a society where marriage does have a legal or it has a societal role to play.
The state.
But I mean, at this point, what?
I was about to say, I agree with you. The state should have an interest in the idea of a legal institution. I mean, the family as a legal institution. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, but the thing is, at this point, because it can be used to bully people to going against their convictions, then I mean, at this point, it's not really what we have isn't marriage. I mean. When we got when we have easy divorce and gay marriage, it's not marriage anymore.
That's true. The point of fighting the whole definition of marriage battle, as I understand it, has been to try to has been for the sake of what gets to count as parents and adoption and so on, has really been what it's been about, because if
I think it has to do with, I mean, adoption laws were liberalized before gay marriage came online.
Yeah, in Minnesota we had civil unions long before
so
this.
I think that's putting the cart before the horse. I think I don't believe in conspiracy theories, but insofar as this helps sort of a deconstruction of the culture generally, it's because it just decentralizes one of the main institutions that conservatives used to organize around, right?
Mm-hmm. I mean, but the thing is, I think maybe another reason why they can't support polygamy is that, I mean, I think, obviously from my belief, from my point of view, the Jedi are evil. But I mean, no, I'm being more serious that when they, when they wanted to redefine marriage to be between two men or two women, conservatives, we cried, well, when you can just redefine it when it's expedient or when it's politically when it's convenient for you, then what does it actually mean? And if they start going, all right, well, polygamy is fine now. Love is not just between two people. I mean, are people really going to go along with the idea that, all right, no, love is no longer just between two people? Which, even at that point, people could still you could conceivably stomach that idea.
We're already approaching that. I mean,
the thing is, it's not even people. Yeah, go ahead.
No, you're good. Yeah.
Well, it's just, I mean, obviously, marriage is a mess right now even for heterosexuals with the massive divorce rates, and people obviously. I think what I've seen is the kind of normal, healthy relationships between men and women seem to be breaking down.
Well, I want to tie this back to what I was trying to originally say when we're talking about creating individuals. This Lockean concept, being pulled forward into our understanding of modern times is still with us. This idea of the individual as a vessel of rights. Of course, when we were talking at the time, we were talking about natural rights, and we were talking about this idea that there was some type of consistent view of nature and the family and the way it responded to that. But now you divorce the family from that. You take away the idea of natural rights because, hey, everything is subjective. And now all of a sudden you have a complete investment in this idea that we're completely and totally economic beings.
Say that last part again, sorry.
Well, the idea that we're completely and totally mainly economic beings, and that as a vessel of rights, because we don't talk about, the rights of children to have two parents, or the rights of children to know their father, know their mother. Right.
Yeah, it's.
I think one of the best arguments against gay marriage is the idea that we have all this evidence, the statistics that show even liberals they'll always argue they'll acknowledge fatherlessness is a problem. Kids should grow up with their father. Okay, then how can you defend gay marriage?
Well, yeah, but they'll just say, well, it's the fact that you've got two parents, not the fact that you have
that
parents
they're
of two
actually
sexes.
parents.
Yeah, or that they're actually parents. I encounter this all the time. That won't cause a liberal that won't cause a progressive to blink. But I guess.
Well, I mean, they love the single mother, anyways. So.
Yeah, it's true.
I guess. Well, I always.
How long do you think it'll be till pedophilia?
Over my dead body.
We are getting. We're getting tremors of that, because when you have these articles like saying you have this sort of movement. You see a lot of this on Tumblr, but you see. But it's already made its way to the mainstream media. Is that you have these people that sort of I'm a pedophile, but I don't act on it. It's sort of like there's a way of trying to normalize it to a certain extent. Well, as long as you're not acting.
In some ways, me because of my feels.
In some ways, this is not like you can understand the motivation of this is not terrible because the idea is chastity is right for some people. That some people have to embrace chastity in order to be virtuous.
I mean, if you understand that, you know, if you have those feelings, but you say, "All right, I'm not going to act on them. I'm going to be convinced." I mean, I mean, that's, I guess, might be fine.
No,
I mean,
in the sense of
but the places where these articles are coming from are not places that believe in chastity.
All right, yeah.
Maybe if they were to entertain, I don't even know if this is possible, but if there was a way we could terminate the sex drive of these people, I would be in favor of that. Like,
well, there used to be punishment for people like this, was chemical castration.
Makes sense.
It happened to Alan Turing.
Hello, can you hear me, guys?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, you talked over me like a few times, but I'll have to clarify that. But I don't know if I cut it out or something, but I was trying to make a larger point that the dangerous thing about entertaining these people as pedophiles and as chaste pedophiles isn't the fact that they're taking this route to their sexuality. It's the fact that the sexuality will define a new community, right, and a new identity group.
Yes.
Which will have political interests. And I think the root of all of these problems, or one of them that we didn't mention beforehand, is the fact that we actually take sexual urges, and then when we use those sexual urges to define communities and identity groups. And that's been one of the most destructive things that we've experienced. There was an article in First Things that I thought was brilliant, and people need to read
First
this.
Things is a great magazine, by the way. If you guys all need to follow it on all the social media and try and read it when you get a chance.
Yeah, so this article was called Against Heterosexuality. And I think this is really where people need to start looking, right? I don't consider myself a heterosexual. I try to shun the term as much as possible. Yeah. Because I don't believe that sexual desires actually create my identity. Now, I always say this, like, am I heterosexual? Well, I don't know. Like, if I just let my sexuality go wherever I wanted to, maybe I'd have all sorts of crazy desires develop within me.
True.
I remember that I remember all sorts of crazy desires sort of coming up once you start just letting everything go, right? So I don't believe that sexuality is static, and therefore it can't be used to base an identity on.
Yeah, and I think anyone, given the right circumstances, could be what's the word? Turned toward or away from just about anything.
I mean, look at prison. Look at prisons.
Look at Muslim rape culture. I mean, we don't see that.
We don't talk about that. We don't talk about that.
Yeah. Well,
there's rape culture is something that happens on universities with lots of white people. It's not something that happens
it happens on
mass immigration from Muslims.
I mean, I mean, rape cultures exist on, you know, American college campuses. You know, the safest places on earth.
Here's the thing, though. Let's okay, because you brought up something that I thought we might discuss real quick in the limited time we have. We talk about okay. First of all, a lot of us will watch people like Sargon, like Teal Deer, like some of these other. You know, we kind of agree that they point out some of the problems with these concepts of rape culture and third wave feminism and all that, but yet we would fundamentally disagree. Well, put it this way, you have these situations where you'll have this man who had a consensual relationship, or seemed at the time to be a consensual relationship with somebody else, and then that other person will scream rape, and that's automatically deemed as, you know, it's rape, even if it was. And as much as I want to say, it's like, yeah, it's injustice for the other person not getting a hearing, or at least being tried in the court of public opinion, or whatever the school has. I still think, though, that this obsession with rape culture would not have occurred without this emerging hookup culture. Yes, hookup culture. Hookup
culture is rape culture, and rape culture is hookup culture as far as the college campus is concerned.
Absolutely.
I mean, if you want an interesting little fact, is when you compare the kind of college life or the kind of social expectations of young adults from the 20s and 30s to the 50s, you actually had a kind of reversal. You had people going to more conservative. In the 20s and 30s, there was actually this kind of hookup culture. There was this is where you got the emergence of the idea of, like, the stud, the guy. You know, your social position in colleges was determined by how many girls you could hook up with.
Or the cult of the flapper.
Yeah. because she was doing disgusting things like voting or drinking the devil's drink.
No, well, just the idea that people could talk, like young people, like pitiful young people today, talking frankly about subjects such as sex, or the fact that it's becoming much more culturally acceptable. Yeah, terrible, I know.
But I mean, she's showing off her thigh. But anyways, but
I think that's Abu Dhabi, not necessarily 1920s Princeton.
But what I was going to say is, in the 50s, you had this kind of whole reversal of, no, everything should be about marriage. You know, everything should, extreme monogamy. Wait till marriage. You know, and the thing is, because the average age of marriage in 1955 was
20.
19.
Wow. Whoa.
80. Yeah, you had. Yeah, that was. It was, the whole idea was that you would go steady. That was because, you know, where you had the idea of hookups in the 20s and 30s, in the 50s you had the idea of going steady. You know, you'd find your one guy or girlfriend, and you date them, and then you would marry them. That was the expectation. So these things actually do kind of switch.
Yeah.
But then, of course, in the 60s you got the whole free love thing.
Yeah, you know, the greatest generation, when they came home from World War II, they all pretty much had kind of the same plan, you know?
Mm-hmm.
The plan was, you know, either get with the girl you left behind or find a girl and get married and have kids. And did you see the Agent Carter show?
I've heard of it.
I haven't seen it, but yeah, I've heard of it.
Well, one thing that made me want to break stuff was this feminist moment in the show where Agent Carter has this ditzy stereotype of a friend who is kind of with the program as far as that agenda is concerned, and Carter is out of it. You know, she is wanting to be, you know, uber feminist, and she don't need no man. And the show portrays that as the absolute opposite of what it was.
Downton Abbey had a lot of that too.
With it is completely ditzy, and the uber feminist who's, you know, out of it is the super competent one who knows what she wants. You know, it's as
if the ditzy girl doesn't know what she wants.
Yeah.
That's a very common portrayal in modern media.
Yeah, and that
has anybody
that
seen,
so much.
has anybody read Gentlemen Prefer Blondes or seen the movie?
Yeah,
I've seen the movie.
Yeah, that actually kind of plays on the idea of the ditzy. The ditzy woman, it might not be as ditzy as you think. They might not be as stupid as you think they are.
Yeah, the thing is, people in the 1950s did a better job of making the majority of people happy than almost any other time in American history you can think of.
Or at least women from statistics.
I mean, the thing is, you know...
And I said the majority of people. Obviously, minorities in the 50s had some problems. But the majority of people were happy, and that's an achievement.
Even with the African-American community, I mean, obviously they still had the horrible segregation, but, you know... blacks had much higher employment than they do now. There was a much lower divorce rate. There was much lower rates of single mothers in the black community back then. But the thing is,
black middle class had a higher percentage, right?
There was a black middle class, but yeah, can't remember what I was going to say now. But
sorry.
Oh yeah, I think what I was going to say is that
it wasn't bad. It was in some ways it was better for blacks even for blacks.
In some ways, yes. In some ways, obviously not all. Not all.
Yeah, and that's true. So
I mean, Thomas Sowell even pointed out that in 1929 the African American unemployment rate was lower than the white one.
Wow.
I was going to say they had a real work ethic at that time. I was going to say the unstated assumption of the Buckley fusionist conservatism was that the 1950s basically had it right.
Yeah, and I'm wondering if we're so consolidated over why the 1950s was awesome, why is fusionism dying?
Because the people that grew up in the 50s are dying.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing is, it's like, I mean, I remember what I was going to say. It's just a brief thing. Is, people point out, yeah, the 50s might be great, but, they had all the horrible sexism, and not really. I mean, the whole kind of, 60s corporate ladder Mad Men thing, men didn't really treat women like that. I asked my grandmother. She was a, very traditional 50s, 60s housewife. I asked her, how was it when you, were in there? And, she said, she scoffed at the idea. She laughed at the idea that she was oppressed in any way because, her and her husband, my grandfather, they've been married for almost 60 years, and they have a great relationship. And the thing is, both of my grandmothers went to college, so how are they oppressed?
Yeah, the whole thing of the 1950s housewife being oppressed, it happened in some isolated incidents and stuff, but on the grand scale, it's laughable.
So I know we keep on going back to the past, but let's just answer the big question.
We have to get back to the future.
What do we do about this? Come on. But that's the big question. This is the ultimate question now.
That's heavy.
Can I say something?
Sure.
Okay, so what I was going to say in the last segment, to bring it to the present, is it seems like back in the 1950s and then, we had more faith in our institutions, and we weren't so hyper-capitalist about everything. I mean, we were capitalist, there were markets and stuff, but when I think, I'm the left-wing guy, obviously, out of the group, but when I look at the right-wing commentators and greater narrative in the politics today, it is just all purely hyper-capitalistic, free market, just stuff. It's not about institutions or culture or anything else. It's let's privatize the schools, let's privatize this, let's privatize that, and let's put everything up to the highest bidder. And I think dealing with that first is probably going to solve your guys' problems more quickly than anything else.
I mean, the thing is, you even look at it economically. I mean, I'm definitely of the opinion that the more wealth equality you have, the more stable the society is. Because look at the 1950s. What was the tax? We had my favorite president of all time, Dwight D. Eisenhower.
Eisenhower, yes.
He was a fantastic president. But
yes.
He what was the tax rate on the rich from World War II and then into the 50s? It was at least 50%.
Yeah, it was the top marginal tax rate was like 80%. But I think there's something we have to consider here. First of all, there's no way that a global market would sustain an 80% top marginal tax rate in the modern day. And number two, I don't think that the equality in the 1950s was the product of the tax rate. I think that it was a product of just the increased value of labor relative to
I mean, I will agree, though. Yeah, we're never going to get anything like the 1950s again because that was such a unique period of time. Because it was also, I mean, I think Britain had some of it, but it was largely just centered in America because everywhere else in the world, everywhere else that was in an industrial area, Europe was completely flattened. Asia completely flattened. The Soviet Union largely flattened, and also the thing is,
it's easy when you have a global monopoly.
And the thing is, the Soviet Union, also being a communist country, their economy was fairly closed off from the rest of the world. I mean, yes, the U.S. did have to send them grain shipments because they couldn't feed their own people, but
they had color television before us.
They did.
They did. That was actually a point, like during the 1950s. That was a point they kind of rubbed in America's face.
And they did get into space first.
Well, that's after they burned up, I think, like one or two cosmonauts before they did. But yeah.
No, they didn't. Nothing happened.
Nothing happened. Always Yuri. First time.
Nothing happened. I love the.
Anyway, sorry.
Happened.
Perfect.
Sorry. Continue, Fritz. Sorry.
But no, I mean, the thing is, I might agree with Data that obviously the global economy has changed has very much changed since the 50s. But I'm saying, as a result, in the 50s we did have a high level of economic equality. There was a very robust, very large American middle class.
But you also got to keep in mind, though, when we talk about income, when we talk about equality, what kind of equality are we looking at? Because even most communist countries have some level of equality, even if there's a huge disparity, of course, between the leadership and the average person. But for the most part, there's roughly a level of equality. I think what we're looking for, I think would be ideally was something like Aristotle was talking about an ideal property middle class.
Hello?
No.
Hello? Hello?
Since you brought in Aristotle, I think I would actually like to just make a remark. I'm not sure if equality is actually the operative goal we should be trying to achieve. I think if we want to win the culture war, the main thing we have to do, economic-wise, is change the institutions so as to sustain the family unit. I think that's where we have to start.
And the thing is, I think that's a big reason. I mean, I think definitely the sexual revolution has very much.
I'm
on mute.
But anyways, what I was going to say is, one of the big reasons we can't, why the birth rate has dropped so low. Obviously, yes, it's part of it is due to the cultural reasons, but you ask a lot of people, well, they just can't afford a child right now. You can't afford it. It's too expensive right now.
It's a liability now. Not an asset.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I guess that explains why, even back when, I made a point in a video, the Lacey Green video, where, all right, well, you had piss poor peasant women in the Middle Ages having kids. They didn't turn out fine, but they still did it. But
yeah,
I think it's keep in mind most.
The thing is, if you're a farmer, if you're a farmer in an agrarian society, you need a lot of kids. You need farm hands. But now, having a kid, what are they? They don't really benefit you. They don't benefit you immediately, because ultimately, though, the problem with having an aging population is who supports the Social Security. You have a very large, this is why the problem that faces millennials in an economic wise in the next decade is that all our parents, all the baby boomers are going to retire, and that was the biggest generation we've ever had. Because the highest, the most babies in American history were born in 1957.
Yeah, and I see what you're saying, because the Social Security thing now
it's going to collapse.
Yeah, the thing is that all the countries now, they have to make decisions based purely on sustaining the growth rate, and they can't consider culture, they can't consider demographics, they can't consider long-term societal stability. If they don't get to 3% growth continuously over the course of decades, their social safety net's going to collapse.
Well, why do you think that the whole immigration crisis exists in Europe in the first place?
I know, it's an attempt to alleviate that, for sure.
Yeah. I mean, this is what really infuriated me about this. It's like, when that started to happen, okay, because having a society in which people are not producing enough children to sustain themselves, that is a sign of a broken society. That's not supposed to happen. So they should have said, okay, how can we fix this? Not let's let in millions and millions of people, because that will never have any problems, right?
You see, the thing is that the immediacy of the social safety net collapse creates a situation where you essentially have to just take the most immediate route to sustain high growth rates.
Yeah, I mean, that's what infuriates. I mean, honestly, do you think privatizing the Social Security would fix any of this, or
no?
I don't know, but I have Jonathan who wanted to make a point about income inequality before we move too far off the field.
Yeah, I just wanted to say I don't think you can say that income inequality really is what it is, and you guys have already kind of zeroed around to this position and talking about poverty and how we take care of the poor and the social safety net and stuff. But just to think about it, I mean, what does income equality matter if, let's say, we're all living, you could create a society where everybody was living the lifestyle of a millionaire in present-day dollars, and you had a few trillionaires that, say, in the future own planets. I mean,
wrong religion.
Well, I think what you're trying to say is that relative poverty does not matter at all, and the only thing that matters is absolute poverty.
Our people's needs taken care of, and that's what the church used to be good at. That is what used to be focused at.
I mean,
Christian vow to poverty.
Can I say? I think there actually is.
Sorry.
You go. Okay, I was just going to say.
Okay.
Anarcho, go ahead.
Fair enough. The point I'm just going to make is that I think there is a danger when any portion of the population has an excess of wealth and material, because what happens is that those who don't have that immediately grow envious, and that destroys the social cohesion you need to keep the family unit together and to win the culture war, basically. That's all I'll say.
I think like, you can make comparisons between between Rome and the Middle Ages, the early feudal age, because, I mean, people always like to see. I like to contend that there were actually some benefits to the collapse of the Roman Empire, to the collapse of Rome, in that all of the social problems that the Romans had went away. You didn't have the massive slave state anymore, and you didn't have the massive wealth inequality. You didn't have to have a welfare state, because the Romans had a proto-welfare state by ensuring that because they had kicked all the Roman farmers off the land and made them all slave plantations, you had a whole bunch of unemployed Roman citizens living in the cities with nothing to make money off of.
So what's the relationship? What's the connection?
What I'm saying is the point is you had a massive wealth inequality in the Roman Empire, but afterwards, when you got to the early feudal ages, the thing is, even the nobles and kings, or the kings, yes, but the average noble that the peasant's going to live under is hardly richer than they are. There was not going to be all that much to actually distinguish them, aside from the fact that they'd live in a tiny little manor house.
I think that when people are envious, we have a lot of people who are concerned about inequality. I'm not so sure they're necessarily upset about wealth. In some sense, they're more upset about status.
Exactly, that was the point I was making. Because the thing is, well, maybe not so much, because the thing is, because it's hard, because yes, the feudal lords, they had the only thing they really actually did have was status. That was really, they had almost no money. They had almost no actual physical wealth. They had no real material wealth. They were just kind of glorified peasants that had gotten.
But can you get to your point without I'm trying to cut the.
I think we can move on. My point was just saying that this has happened before. I was just trying to say that this has happened before, but we can move on to the other topic, which I'm
actually trying to get to I know we all like to reference this, but I'm trying to get a little bit more contemporary with this. We're trying to focus us on, okay, where are we going right now, right?
Deus Ex.
Yeah.
Can I say something?
Go ahead. Where we're going.
I liked how Data put it in one of his videos. I don't think it's inequality or it's status or anything else. I think it's about dignity more than anything else.
Yes, dignity.
And the idea that when you started a company in the 50s, you worked the company took care of you, you have the gold watch, you had the retirement, you had the, this idea that you'd start with a company, you'd work for them, you do right by them, they do right by you, and that evaporated, right? When the right started losing a lot of the culture war, I feel like in some aspects they started winning the economic war as far as, hyper-capitalism.
Yes.
Everybody became expendable, the unions collapsed, and so now you have a whole bunch of workers that don't know if they're going to be fired from one month to the next. It's not envy. It's more, I think, desperation and just wanting some form of stability, and the only way they feel they can get it is from a pursuit of wealth, and that's why people are scared to have children and everything else. Because if you work under a company, even if you're not making a bunch of money, you're at least sure about where you're going to be tomorrow. You know what kind of environment you'll raise your kids in. But you don't want to have a kid and get fired next week. That's the worst thing that can happen. So,
yeah. Well. And I think the way the future is headed with automation,
yes,
also so you're going to end up eventually having to move towards a zero-based economy. Basically, goods are going to become so cheap that if you have a model whereby the only means of accumulating the ability to consume those goods is by working, well, the whole system is going to collapse.
But the thing is, for the past 40 years, what have we had? We've had stagnant wages. The price of things are going up. Everything's going up, but the thing is, we're not making it. $20 doesn't buy you nearly as much groceries as it did, even 10 years ago. The fact is, people are not able to afford. Food is becoming so expensive now. I mean, basic goods are becoming more and more expensive. All right, Ben.
Can I say why I think that might be the case? I'm just quickly going to say I think it's because we've seen greater centralization in both the public and private sector. That we're increasingly being divorced from the people who are supposed to rule us in government and also from our bosses. We just all lines of communication have basically broken down between the two parties.
I would like to say I do not believe we are headed for a post-scarcity economy.
You don't?
No, I just have flat-out theological reasons for that. I mean, Genesis tells us we're not headed for a post-scarcity economy.
You could have a temporary post-scarcity economy, right?
Wait, the robot thing happened again. What are you saying?
You could have, just because ultimately we might experience a non-post-scarcity economy in the future doesn't mean we could have one for the future sometime.
What he said was just because ultimately we will have a non-post-scarcity economy, it doesn't mean that we might have one temporarily in the near future or something like that.
Yes, exactly. That's it.
Oh, Well, I don't think humankind is that powerful. I mean, we could be, but I doubt it.
Well, I mean, the thing is, sorry, do you have anything?
Yeah.
Else, or my thing was that, it's very true. Everything is being centralized. I mean, a famous thing that's posted is that, like, in 1989, the media was controlled by 50 different companies. Now it's controlled by 6.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like there's a thing from early on in the game Deus Ex where you're talking to the leader of the of the resistance or revolutionary group, and he points out facts going, in 1900 90% of Americans were unemployed, and now, well, in the game universe it says which is about 40 years from now, it says only about 2% are, and if you look at the stats right now, only around 7-8% of Americans are self-employed right now. So you have even more disconnect of your labor from your work, and that I think you can even add to the fact that the quote-unquote work we're doing doesn't really even seem to be all that satisfying. I mean, if you're at least when you're building something in a factory, you're actually constructing something. Now we're just a lot of us are just pushing buttons on a computer.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So the dignity of work is being lost.
As a software engineer, I'm okay with that.
I mean, I'm all right, but I'm talking about let's say you're just some sales representative, or you're
okay,
you're working some dead end office job. I mean, certainly you can use a computer.
Job manufacturing.
I mean, I want to be a writer. I'm going to be using a computer. I mean, I'm still at least creating something.
Yeah. Right. So, well, assuming we do get a post-scarcity economy, I think that the way you have a post-scarcity economy is people move toward art as a means of getting currency.
Yeah, didn't you see the video? A computer can draw.
I think that this is a problem, right? Because in a scarcity economy, it's a very corrosive force on the human soul not to have to actually work and do something. Well, and I'm frankly quite terrified of that prospect.
Well, I think people will always have things to do, and the thing is, though, those things will be a lot less necessary to survival than they used to be.
Well, I mean, there's a very poignant episode of the anime Kino's Journey where the main character goes to a country where it's so technologically advanced that computers can just basically run everything. They make it, nobody needs money. It's basically the scenario where we think we're heading towards. And anyways, it's explained to the main character that basically what they did is they set it up so all the human beings that live there do actually do some mundane office job. They do some, very pointless computer work. Just so they could have something to do.
Sounds like Japan.
Yeah, there's also a similar. Have you guys read The Diamond Age? It also describes a similar thing, right?
Absolutely, yeah. That's a great
book. They essentially create these sort of insular conservative cultures that rely on. You can create an artificial economy inside these little cultural spheres, which are all independent of each other.
Well, hold on. My art theory, I think, needs a slightly better defense. My most recent video discussing the new game No Man's Sky talks about the inherent limitations of procedurally generated art. And there are some hard limits on the kind of art that computers can produce in this automatic way. basically means artists are not in danger of getting replaced by computers. They are absolutely not.
So
that's not a thing. Yeah.
We're rounding out on our time, and I just wanted to refocus us on the question of what is to be done, right? So I'll just throw. I know I think we're always kind of getting on these tangents, but I'll just focus it by throwing out a point of controversy. Who's heard of the Benedict option?
Yeah, no, I have.
No. Can you just explain?
So the Benedict option is, well, I think it was originally developed by this author Alistair MacIntyre, where he wanted people a return to virtue, essentially having conservative communities isolate themselves from mainstream culture in order to sort of preserve the virtuous culture that had been lost post-cultural revolution, post-sexual revolution, and post-culture war. And this has been taken up by a blogger who I have, I don't know, somewhat negative opinions of, Rod Dreher. And he's trying to make this his cause celeb, where he promotes this idea that Christians need to create this separate culture for themselves apart from the mainstream. And I'm curious what people think, if people think this is going to be the solution for cultural conservatives going forward. Do you think that...
I favor that.
If not the Benedict option, what else?
I mean, I'm only in certain parts. I mean, if all society goes tits up in the coming decades, which I think it is, if we kind of have these actual physical communities, out in the countryside somewhere, yeah, we'll be fine when all the cities collapse. But I really don't like the idea though of just completely isolating ourselves off from the rest of the world.
I think the fact is that we're from a conservative Christian perspective, everything is getting worse. There's in the short term, I could see a lot of Christians at least more conservative Christians gravitating toward the idea of the Benedict option. I mean, as a short-term solution, it sounds nice, and I'll be honest that it's something that I've really considered as a possible alternative for myself and my future family. But you're right, is that I don't know. It's not something. If we hope to win the culture war,
we need Andrew Ryan to build Rapture.
What?
Well, we had that. It was called Columbia, and some asshole destroyed it.
Yeah, gosh, we could have had our own. That's well, or you could view Rapture as sort of a Benedict option for supposedly the best and the brightest.
The Mirandites.
Mirandites, yeah.
I don't think it's feasible. We already have something kind of like it. It's called the Amish. How much influence do they have in our culture? I mean, yes, they're.
Well, I don't think the idea is to have. I don't think the idea is to have influence. It's not supposed to be. It's not supposed to have.
Kind of become
to stop them. It's to stop culture from influencing us.
Have you ever seen the movie Blast from the Past?
No.
No.
Okay, your homework assignment is to watch that and then come back.
Ben, make the point. So.
Okay, well, it's a movie that deals with the concept of cultural isolation to preserve a past state of society, and then a reemergence into the current society and an exploration of the many differences that crop up in just what was the number? 30 years?
Sure. So you think this bears on the Benedict option? You think it's a good idea, Ben?
Oh, sorry.
Well, hold on. I'm asking Ben.
Okay, that's fine.
Well,
we're talking about men now, darling.
Well, there is an idea like that in Latter-day Saintism. The idea of the center place.
Zion.
Yeah, you think that's a good idea?
Well, I think there are parts of a good idea in it. Let me put it like that. It's too long to get into now, but there are parts of a good idea in it, and there are parts that I think are bad, and it's complicated to sort the good parts from the bad parts in that idea.
See, there's a lot of stuff that Smith proposed in regarding to what was the cult? There was something like related to the church in terms of community. I forgot what there was a technical term for it, but a sort of a mutualistic society to a certain extent, have co-ownership, very stronger economic ties with that. That's a very attractive option for me, and I think
if there was only a church organization we could actually trust that much, which there isn't.
That's the key. That's the key.
I know the Catholics in here are going to be screaming right now. If I can if I may make a point on this, is like I don't agree with the Benedict option really. I think it's
not just because Rod Dreher is kind of an idiot. I'm sorry, but
Roger Ebert. Roger Ebert, the film review. Oh,
Rod Dreher, whatever how you ever pronounce his name.
I think it's just Roger Ebert.
If you look him up, he looks nothing like Roger Ebert.
I know.
He looks like a hipster.
I think it was a joke, but okay.
Yeah, but anyways, what I was gonna say is like I think it's much more. I think I think engaging with the culture as it is right now is a much better option. Yeah, because the thing is, I mean, because I think a point I made in my voting is a sin video, but
good one, by the way.
Thank you. But anyways, the thing I'm going to follow it up with is going to be Christians and culture or whatever, and because you hear a lot from Christian leaders going, we need to be actively engaged in politics. We need to get it's this idea that if we can just get like an evangelical Christian into the presidency and get the Supreme Court justices to change. Do you know how all right? Let's say that happened. Let's say Ted Cruz became president, and
it's I
know. I'm saying let's just say we win it politically somehow, and we get all these conservatives on the Supreme Court. So Roe v. Wade gets overturned, and so does the gay marriage. Can you imagine the cultural backlash? We would become what they all said the religious right was. The thing is, I don't.
How are you going to legalize abortion when everyone's demanding like sex has no consequences, right?
Exactly. That's why I think engaging politically right now, at least on a national level. I think locally, yeah, I think yes, we should try and engage with that. But I mean, we need to engage it with the culture. We need to talk. We need to fight this war culturally. I mean. This kind of shows the level of kind of delusion that's in the heads of Christian leaders, thinking that we need to solve this politically, not culturally. I mean, I want to outlaw abortion as much as any of you guys do, but the thing is, I don't want to do that until society firmly rejects the idea of sexual freedom. And
you're not going to legalize abortion when there's demand for 1.5 million abortions a year. And Anarcho, I think, do you have something to say?
Well, I'd just like to comment on the morality of the Benedict option. As a man with strong libertarian impulses, I do sympathize with the idea of not imposing my values on another person so long as they respect the same right not to impose them on me. Now, maybe that's only because my values aren't winning in the mainstream.
But where do the roads come from?
Always trips you up, man.
But from a pragmatic solution, I also think it might be a good idea to sort of retreat for a while and create these agree to sort of disagree in terms of where we choose to live, and then if our values truly are superior, then it will show in these stronger communities will form, and then that could actually turn the tide of the culture war in our favor.
Yeah, I'd like to jump in here and say that I think people naturally crave community. I think that's what you see in the rise of the progressives and SJW. They find a sense of community there. They feel rejected for whatever reason, and they want. What we got to do is provide a better community. And I'll tell you the reason why. I went through an atheist period in my life where I abandoned the church, and I've just come back here in the past couple of years. But the reason I left is because I didn't have a community there. That's the reason I abandoned, and I think that's where a lot of these kids are coming from. Or people of any age, or whatever, is there's nothing there. The church was supposed to take care of the church first and foremost, primarily, and then work out into the community.
I could say that is a definite problem, particularly in suburban areas. It's really bad. The tendency to go to mega churches and kids that get raised in mega churches, they don't have any connection to. I mean, their parents may love it, but the kids don't have any connection. Have a sense of community. There's no sense of discipleship or sense of accountability, and so that's why it's very easy for a lot of these people to fall away, such as yourselves. I mean,
that's the thing is like the evangelical movement. As much as I like certain elements of it, and I consider myself somewhat part of it, but probably not so much anymore after really understanding a lot more. Is that they made so many horribly stupid mistakes, in the past several decades. And the thing is, like I said at the very beginning of the stream, that when they went after Dungeons and Dragons and when they went after video games with Jack Thompson, I mean that alienated a huge segment of the population. It really helped too, because who are probably the biggest group of atheists? Demographic of atheists is white men. Middle class white men are atheists.
At least
largely.
The ones who wear fedoras are.
Yes, and the thing is, the problem is, the church should be the group that tries to take care of the people who are kind of abandoned or forgotten, or, the oppressed, the marginalized in society. And so what they should do right now is obviously shut up and stop talking about how oppressed middle-class black people are. But look at who is socially abandoned in society right now. Who is it okay to absolutely hate and despise as much as you want? And there's
the
no
young white male.
Yeah, and so
imagine.
It's largely young white males. And anyways, so imagine how great it would be.
You broke up.
Hello,
Fritz.
Imagine how great it would be, and then he cut out.
That's all he said. Wow.
Now we shall never know the brilliant solution he had to all of our problems.
He had the solution right there.
Right. Culture war because of that, right
George Soros just took him out like that.
Well, can I introduce another controversial topic on solutions? You guys are familiar with MGTOW, right?
Final solution, so go ahead.
Oh, terrible.
I know, but it's a reaction, right? I'm not promoting it as an idea. I'm not promoting it. I'm not promoting his idea. You've got a bunch of people that are completely. What it is, I think, is that you've got this response of the SJW, regressive, feminist culture that's rising. What happens if men just say, I don't want to be part of that?
Okay.
If I can find a traditional...
Rant initiated.
Yes.
MGTOW is like the stupidest idea ever. People know MGTOW, right? That's essentially what we're proposing, right?
No, I'm not actually proposing that. I'm just...
Can you hear me?
Hello?
Hello?
Yeah, hear you. Fritz, we're in the middle. I'll come back to your great idea.
All right, thanks.
MGTOW is...
Reminds me of the Shaker movement, really.
The men's rights movement in MGTOW, and don't get me wrong, I think I really like Karen Strawn, but the idea that men are going to somehow leverage society to make reforms is a ridiculous idea. It's never going to happen, and it exacerbates the problems with feminism almost. It sort of encourages the same.
Hello?
Oh.
Yeah, we can hear you, Fritz.
Alright, is the sound quality okay? I'm using a different microphone.
It's a lot louder. Can you turn it down?
Oh, sure.
Sorry.
Is it better now?
Yeah, it's a little better. We'll come back to Fritz, but if people want to kick around that controversial idea before...
Well, let's let Fritz finish what he was trying to say before he got cut off.
What I was saying is that it would be so helpful. Imagine if the church right now reached out to young white males, the most marginalized socially group in our society. That could be immensely helpful right now. We could help. We would be able to reach a lot of the fallen.
How would we do that though?
Well, just outreach. There's all this outreach right now. If you read a lot of Christian publications, they talk about reaching out to the black community, or everything. If you go to the website Christianity Today, which has turned into a joke.
Yes, it has.
Has it?
Almost every article, it's about every week. You have an article about race, racial reconciliation, be a cuck. It's always about race, and they have nothing interesting to say. They've even entertained the idea of reparations at this point.
Yeah, that's one of the worst ideas in the history of.
I think we have both agreed. If there was actually if we could actually have it so we could just all white people just pay one check of $1,000 to black people, and they could never bring up the idea of privilege again, we would do it in a heartbeat. But
I've said this before, but this is totally off topic. But I said there's literally no amount of money that I would not pay to have my descendants be immune from accusations of historical grievance. But that money,
there's no honest proposal to actually grant that. So.
All right, yeah, but anyways, what I was gonna say is,
yeah, that's off topic. Go ahead, Frank.
The church is doing a really terrible job of trying. I mean, from a lot of these articles, it almost seems like they don't want to reach out to white men. They don't want to reach out to those people.
Well, you're taking Christianity today as somehow representative of Christianity, and it's not.
They're one of the.
That is true.
It's representation of a certain amount of Christians, so it's still worth talking about.
Well, actually, the thing is, though, I'm not really so much worried about the race thing now, because they actually had an article about how evangelicals or how Christians view race. And the thing is, evangelicals in America were actually among the least likely people to support something like Black Lives Matter. So they're totally out of touch with their own readers.
Yeah.
Well, of course, the readers are the ones that are always stupid, not the people that run it.
I might disagree with that, but anyways,
I think that. Really,
well, I wouldn't be surprised if they came out with Christianity is dead and next.
Oh,
so
yeah.
we had Christianity today.
And then Hulk Hogan sues them, and they go away forever.
Yeah, pretty much.
But Christianity Today get Hulk Hogan's latest sex tape. If we could somehow orchestrate that, we could get
make Christianity into
today.
BuzzFeed. The top 10 things you love about Jesus.
Number 3 will shock you.
I just found it.
Not going to solve all our problems, guys. I'm just saying.
What isn't?
Peter Thiel isn't going to solve all our problems.
I know. Well, no, Hulk Hogan is.
Yes, he saved. Listen, he was the great slayer of Gawker and Kotaku. You know, he might be able to save us.
But what I was going to say is that what were we talking about? So yeah, that's what I was saying is I think there should be more Christian outreach to this group of white men.
I don't see how that can be done because all these outreach is specific to different groups. I can see how outreach to the Mexican immigrants makes sense. All you have to do there is just make sure you have resources in Spanish, and yeah, that'll reach them. But white males don't have a different language. There's nothing about.
They have a cultural language.
Yes.
Yeah.
They like anime?
Video games. They like video games.
Oh, right. So make Christian video games.
I mean, I don't think it just has to be white males, though.
This is.
I was going to say, black males are suffering under the same sexual revolution that white men are. I don't know if you guys have watched anything like Tommy Sotomayor or any of the more kind of dicey black commentators coming from, a more conservative or not the traditional civil rights movement point of view. But they're disaffected too. It doesn't just have to be white males. It could just be men in general.
We're changing the topic, but I was just going to comment very briefly. I think if we're talking about sort of young white male and educated, I think what really would attract that demographic is portraying Christianity as a challenge, as something that requires something, right?
Yes.
That's how the demographic will be attracted, not by making Christian video games, not by making Pepe being crucified or whatever.
Not Christ Chan.
Christian. Oh, no, wait. First of all, hold on. Don't diss Christ Chan.
I know.
Diss Christ Chan. The second.
Amen.
Okay, good. Second is
that
even though
Christ Chan is a meme that was created on 4chan of a
right. I remember that now. Sorry.
Yeah, it was originally in response to a Muslim who created like Muslim anime characters.
Yeah.
Anyway.
But anyways, yeah.
Quick. But real quick. But yeah, I think Distributus has got a point here. Is that you need to, if we're going to talk to young white men, many of whom who are attracted to the alt-right because they crave something primordial, something that challenging, something to get to appeal to their manhood. I think this is something that Christianity needs to overcome, because Christianity, particularly from the alt-right, is attacked as not just being for universal religion or religion of cucks or whatever. It's because Christianity is considered by many of them to be effeminate, and that's something that Christianity's had to deal with for years, of course. But Christianity needs to
Richard Spencer.
Yes, even like going back to the Nazis and going before that, they've had to deal with the struggles like love your neighbor, turn the other cheek. I mean, these are quite effeminate values. But
that was Nietzsche's criticism.
Yeah. I mean, this is what attracts a lot of young, white, disaffected males. So to anti-Christian ideas such as this. So we need to, if we could present Christianity as something that is masculine or something that appeals to their manhood, I think that we could reach young white males.
I think this is a position where the Catholics really are in a better position than the Protestants because they have the tradition of chivalry that they can, the idea of the knight that they can draw upon, where this is not associated with Protestantism, Pilgrim's Progress notwithstanding.
I think Pilgrim's Progress would be like an excellent starting point.
Sure.
At least maybe like a modern version of it, but yeah.
Well, they're actually. Have you read the C.S. Lewis version of it?
Pilgrim's Regress. I started it, but I haven't finished it.
It's not one of Lewis's best works, in my opinion, and I think he had that same opinion himself.
It's entertaining. It's entertaining, but at any rate, I think that really we have to ask ourselves, why is the alt-right so appealing, right?
I think it's just because, it mainly, I mean, it might just be actually kind of simple in a way that the alt-right is, you have these white males who are said, you're horrible, you're evil, you're bad, you're privileged and all this stuff. You have the alt-right that says, no, you're actually, this is a movement, this is an identitarian movement for you. It's not around you.
That's part of it. Part of it's that it's this place that's not in line with sort of the cultural Marxist voices outside. I also think it's sort of aspirational in sort of like neo-fascist stuff, and in older fascism too. There's this idea of overcoming, of being heroic. I think that's really what people are attracted to it, right? I mean,
because we don't really have any struggles anymore.
The MRA and the MGTOW inverts sort of the progressive paradigm as well, by portraying men, and white men in particular, as being victims. But I don't think people want to be victims. They want to have heroic quests to participate in.
Mm-hmm. That might, that's a good idea. That's a good suggestion. Or that's an interesting point.
Yeah, this is one reason why I think we really one way in which I think we can reach some of these Sargonite type people is by subverting feminist objections to so-called sexist tropes, like the damsel in distress, for example.
But I think actually, though, I mean, Sargon does a beautiful job of that already. I think the next step is to promote a positive vision.
Not really. What I'm saying is they say they say no, those things aren't sexist. But what they never say is that the damsel in distress idea is actually good because chivalry. That doesn't come up outside of Christianity very much.
Well, feminists will try to turn that into like chivalry is just a system of ethics that are meant to keep women down. So they're going to have to be able to respond to that criticism.
Yeah, this is the thing with chivalry, though, guys. I don't think chivalry can be commended. It can only be like in the abstract. I think it only can be related in stories or demonstrated in reality, right?
Yeah.
Also, you've got to keep in mind that chivalry is somewhat negatively and unfairly, in my opinion, but tied to white knights. Specifically, I mean, it could be also spun as a form of being, like, I don't know.
Virtue signaling?
Virtue signaling, yes. Like the guy that will defend the girl on her honor on the chat room of whatever MMO they're playing.
Right. That's the modern conception of chivalry, though. I think what you're talking about is kind of a revitalization of the medieval sense of, vying to protect the weak, protect the poor, whatever, being a hero in your community.
I agree, but that's the perception, is that they're going to have to overcome that. I mean, I agree with you.
Fundamentally, the common thread in this, though, right, is you're saying that we've got a number of feminist counterfeits posing as Christian principles. We have affectation posing as chivalry. We've got political correctness posing as politeness, right?
Yes.
And we have to essentially make the contrast between the real Christian principle and the feminist counterfeit of that principle.
And I think that's a problem that might also be a problem, is that a lot of, like, you saw that Lutheran satire video about how Christians and feminists agree on a lot of things.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
But the thing is, that might be a problem, because I think we could definitely use that to try and attract a large number of feminists, because again, I think distributors, we were talking a few days ago, and you said, like, one thing they would never expect, or one thing they could never understand, would be a feminist getting attacked, or getting attacked from the left of them. They'll be saying, "Hey, we
around
hate
the
all this
world leftward attack, sort of.
Yeah, and obviously, I think we would be then attacking the objectification of women in the porn industry, right?
Yes. Yes. That's a perfect thing. I never understood why does Jonathan McIntosh not go after porn? And it's obvious, because it would destroy their coalition.
Because he doesn't know what sex is.
Oh, I was actually going to bring that up. I had an idea about that. I heard you talking to the guy on the other stream about that question.
Yeah.
And from what I was watching with Sarkeesian and McIntosh and whatever, the fundamental objection is that in porn, the woman, quote unquote, chooses to be there, and you get the understanding as a viewer that it's of her own volition she's there.
That's
However,
which, like, you're talking about a certain kind of porn, right?
Well, just there's the understanding that the woman, unless we're talking about like raw crime footage where you're killing and raping somebody or doing something ridiculous, like, if it's videotaped, published porn, the idea is...
But not animated porn, because there's not actresses that choose to be there.
I imagine they would find that very problematic.
Right. No, I'm talking...
The only difference is that the characters are animated.
Problematic.
Right?
Well, but the objection is that they're animated in the way that the creator decides them to be, and so the video game characters can't choose how they're portrayed.
But doesn't that make that seem... but the thing is, though, that makes that just makes feminism seem even more ridiculous. Okay.
Oh, it is ridiculous. So, absolutely.
These women in video games, they're not real.
No.
So, what's the point?
I think if they have to explain that, then that's a good thing. Because
yes.
I think that this is the thing. Get the feminists to come out against porn. Because...
Good luck.
Well, good luck to get them to talk about anything. But
I think fundamentally the feminists are going to endorse porn. I think the anti-porn feminists are paper.
Then they can explain why video games are not bad, right? Because if you're willing to accept the objectification of women in porn, you're willing to accept the objectification of women anywhere in media.
Yeah, pretty much.
They can't ask us to sit here and entertain the illusion that porn isn't widespread.
Well, yeah. But there are two different types of feminists, right? So, like the sex-negative types.
Right.
The swerfs and twerfs.
Right.
Yeah.
Like Lacey Green, for example, probably wouldn't object to sexualization in video games. Some of them are made by women, and she thinks that if the women who made them think it's great, then they're great, and she probably wouldn't mind porn or, any of that stuff. It's the sex-negative feminists that are probably behind most of this. So
yeah, that's the thing, is like,
the
only problem,
sex-positive feminists are really united by Hegelianism.
Well, they're sort of commonly Marxists, I suppose, right?
Yeah, but the negativity and positivity in their views of sex are determined by their ideas about historical forces.
Here's my problem, though. Here's my problem with this, is that how much do we? There's still a good part of me that thinks that people like Lacey Green and people like Anita they're only in it for the money. They might believe a lot of this, but
there's a function of human psyche that naturally makes you believe things after you repeat them enough. So it's probably an inner function.
Yeah, I know. Yes, but the thing is, like, I think there was a good point about at some point where it was like, if Lacey Green's when Lacey Green gets older enough, like, which he's not pretty enough anymore for MTV, and they say, all right, you're gonna have, we don't want you anymore or something, would she stick to her principles, or would she just cave in or do whatever's financially expedient to her? Yeah. And I think that would show. Or the thing is, like, if you offered Anita Sarkeesian enough money, would she go back on what she said?
She could be.
Sorry,
Verizon guy. She could be like that feminist version of the Sprint Verizon guy, right?
Yeah, traitor.
TR8R?
Sorry, I couldn't resist.
Well, who's the Sprint? Oh, who's the Sprint Verizon?
Can you hear
guy?
me now?
There's this guy who did the "Can you hear me now?" Verizon commercials.
Mm-hmm.
And now he's advertising for Sprint, where he goes on and says, "Hello, you might remember me as the guy that said, 'Can you hear me now?' But now I'm actually telling you that it's better to prefer Sprint."
Because I'm a sellout.
I know. It's
I've seen the light!
Advertisement.
I've seen the. He's got a come to Sprint moment.
But
well, yeah, they're headquartered here in my hometown, so there you go.
Ooh, fancy.
Sprint.
I think we're nearing the end of this live stream, guys.
So I guess some last thoughts or anything else we can talk about. What we should do?
Give as many and as much last thoughts as you want, I suppose.
Gotcha.
I'm not going to control you guys. I'm this as much as you want to talk about, but I'm done with my questions. So.
All right. Well, should we advertise our channels, or should we do that at the very end?
Well, as you sign out, advertise your channels. But talk as much as you want about anything. Hopefully about culture war stuff, though.
All right. Well, anyways, I guess then as a last note of what we should actually do about the culture wars is, right now, it might seem like a Herculean effort to, reverse all these trends in our culture to try, how Christianity and religion is mocked in the whole sexual revolution and everything. But the thing is, the fact that technology has enabled culture to move so fast means we have a lot more opportunities to actually have some form of influence. So I would say we should on our sides, or what we should aim to have as Christians or as conservatives, if we want to win a new culture war, because as Eric von Manstein said, a war isn't over until you say it's over. But anyways, so we should try and influence these things culturally. We should try and make smart decisions, and I guess that could be another topic for another time, is exactly what we should do. But yeah, we should engage with the culture, not politics, and we should try and present the Christian narrative as something that would be very palatable to our current society. And all right, so to sign off then, I'm Fritz Imperial. You can find my YouTube channel. Please subscribe. I need them. Yeah, and I'm also on Twitter.
I think before we sign out here, I think who has YouTube channels? I think Chroma does, right?
Yes.
Very good.
His videos are really good.
Those are really good. Ben has a YouTube channel. I really like his videos. Can you give a description of your channel, Ben, really quickly?
I do. Despite the distributist always telling us that philosophy is no good, I do educational videos about philosophy, and also video game reviews and politics and whatever else I feel like talking about. but I really try to focus on educational videos about philosophy. And
it's a really great channel on the C.S. Lewis Abolition of Man. So. Slight simplification of my point about narrative defeating argument, but Chroma, do you want to describe your channel?
Or can I just describe mine first before?
Yours.
Yeah. Mine is mainly it's a very new channel, and I've just done a range of topics, but I think it's mainly gonna be me responding to not only just SJWs, but more so the new atheists, going after them and trying to portray them as being just as bad as the other SJWs. But I'm also going to be talking about problems I see with the church.
There's a really good video I liked on that from about Atheism is Unstoppable. I'm mirroring that eventually.
Oh, that was beautiful.
Yeah. Chroma, did you want to describe your channel?
Yeah. It's, I guess you would describe it as clickbait shitlord channel.
You do yourself a disservice to that.
I mean, no, that's pretty much it.
Watch his videos; they're really good.
Yeah, they're funny. Anyone else have a YouTube channel here? And Narco, do you have a YouTube channel?
I don't make any videos, but I do have a channel that you can go subscribe to if you feel like it.
Cool. I have a channel, but there's no videos yet. You probably can see a video I made for the 2012 Republican National Convention. Republican debate, but that's about it.
I'm sure we'll be discussing the election on future Hangouts.
Let's do that.
Yeah.
Race to the Bottom 2016.
Race to the bottom.
Rock against the vote.
In the meantime, I'm sure people will give me comments about what they like this topic. We think it's too broad, and what they think next topic should be too.
Well, I think this was the best hangout we've had yet. I think.
I think so.
Certainly the most focused.
Yeah.
Although I
mean, I think certainly certain tangents are okay, but yeah, this was a good hangout.
Yeah, maybe we went on with a few too many tangents, but overall, I think this is certainly way more focused than last time.
Okay. Well, anyone have any closing thoughts on how we win the culture war? I think that's before we sign out. So I have 4 video channels to put in the description: Ben, Chroma, Fritz, and well, I guess that's it. I guess it's only 3. So, okay, I guess before we sign up, as we sign off, just tell me whatever you think will win us the culture war, is however long you want to take.
Yes.
All right.
Who wants to go first?
I volunteer, Ben.
Oh, well, one thing I actually think is important, even though this seems to get sort of shot down and not talked about much, is I think that the role of cultural and artistic and technological innovation in changing culture is fundamentally important. If you're trying to make a cultural change, then introducing artistic and technological change that you came up with that pushes your ideas is, I think, fundamentally important. But it has to be innovative. And that's a problem with a lot of Christian culture, that's not innovative.
It certainly isn't.
So make more innovative culture is your suggestion. Your suggestion.
Yes.
Any other takers?
I'll go next.
Yeah.
Go for it.
So, as the lefty Sargonite that was often mentioned throughout the discussion.
We're planning your demise, man.
Absolutely.
I look forward to it. I'm hoping for the giant meteor myself. Anyway.
We all do.
Yeah. I guess I can see the appeal, the initial appeal in the Benedict option is what you guys called it. But, I mean, as a liberal, a left liberal, not a progressive, a capital L liberal, I would hope that we could instead build an alliance and look for common things to work together on. So, for example, I think we agreed that part of the problem is the failure of our institutions, the perceived failures, the actual failures, right? I don't want education to be privatized. I don't. I want a coherent cultural artifact that we put forth from one generation to the next. I don't want it to be for sale to the highest bidder and everybody being educated as they'd like, for example.
Yes, well, I fundamentally disagree with you, and I think that public education pushes atheism.
Well, it does. It could.
Right, and that's why we will never, ever, ever, ever have any kind of alliance on these grounds.
Well, we'll have a debate on education later, as well as a hangout on alliances, because I'm all about alliances.
That would be a good hangout.
Yeah,
it's like an episode of Game of Thrones.
Two future hangouts, guys, but I'm focusing on, was it Master Sanders who was talking?
Sorry.
Matt was talking.
Yeah. So the idea is we have to engage in the institutions, and we have to make people have faith in them again. We have to give structure again. We have to
make them great again.
Yeah, we have to make institutions great again, damn it. And then once we start doing that, we have more structure, we have more stability, we can start, having a conversation. That's when I think we can start building on bigger cultural issues, because a victim narrative, like Sargon has been saying recently due to his computing forever thing, a victim narrative has traction when a lot of people feel disposable and feel victimized. And so bringing dignity back, bringing greater cultural cohesion back, I think is a goal that liberals and traditionalists could work together on to kind of push back in this way.
Perhaps, again, we might have some faith in we might have an agreement in and we value certain traditions. We still, I think we both still value certain things about the Western tradition, like the Greek philosophy, right?
Yes, excellent. Yeah. I'll say one thing to paraphrase Abigail Adams: greatness we have in abundance, but where, oh where, will we get all of the red hats?
And along these lines, by that I meant on this issue of education.
Yeah, we'll have to debate on that later sometime, right?
Speaking of education,
I didn't mean at all. I just meant education is not going to be a point where I think we're going to agree. That's all I was saying.
But what I might say about education is, I actually, because the data, you always stress the importance of us conservative Christians, and I think anybody that's just anti-SJW is getting control of the academic institution. Well,
that's the root, not the media.
I had a good relationship. I have a good relationship with one of my professors from my college, and I went to a liberal arts college, and which was fairly liberal, not extremely, but anyways, he's a Christian Catholic conservative, and so perhaps maybe at some point it might be wise to bring him on or to interview him about what it's like to actually be one of the people we would want in our institutions.
What it's like in those. That's an excellent idea. Now, I'm going to, and as this hangout matures, I am going to bring on guests that will be distinct from participants. And when we have those guests on, I think we'll have a much, much stricter form of moderation, which basically no interjecting unless I bring you in, and I'll only ask questions. And then when the guests leave, we'll go back to just going back and forth. But that's a great idea. Let's keep that content going.
We get some Europeans here too.
And not to mention some of the fairer sex, may I?
Please. I loved what you said, Data. That we're not. I imagine you were really scared when. I
was a little bit afraid that we might digress into complaining about the sexual revolution in more specific terms, but I am not hosting a specific discussion on the sexual revolution without having at least 50% women on this chat.
So we need quotas.
Year, man.
Optics.
Because it's 2015.
In the words of Prime Minister BuzzFeed, it's current year.
So who hasn't gone? Master Sanders or Jonathan want to go?
You want to go, Jonathan?
Yeah, I guess my only really comment on it is I don't think going after the left and the regressives on hypocrisy is going to matter anything to the left and the regressives themselves. So like you're talking about white male misogynists, whatever, and that obviously is going to appeal, but there's as far as battling the culture war against the regressives, I don't think they care about hypocrisy. We care about hypocrisy, and when they call us out on it, we have to be able to stand up and say why we're doing what we're doing with integrity. Just as far as being a model in society.
I totally agree. People have to be taught why hypocrisy is bad at this point, which is so amazing, right? Because you're right, the SJWs do not care about it.
Well, they don't have a consistent value standard. It's all postmodern. Maybe do something on postmodernism too would be a great discussion.
Oh, you should get Ad Verdezen on. He was this guy that was on a lot of Kraut streams who would always say, "Well, it's all about the postmodernism." He'd blame everything on postmodernism.
If we could ever get Kraut, that would be amazing.
Oh, I would love to have him on. I tried to get on a stream of his and no success. All right, so Master Sanders hasn't gone?
Well, it's just to add, I think everybody said it's been pretty good enough. I will say, though, is we need to be willing not to just talk about, it's easy to talk about this online. It's fun to talk about things in the abstract or make videos, and it's definitely important, but when we talk about, we need to reach out to young white males, or we need to establish communities, whether or not we go to the Benedict option route, regardless, we need to live the values that we preach, and whether that is working to create sustainable our own families, or foster our own families, or whether that means doing the dirty work and talking to people one-on-one in real life. Whether it's white males or the SJWs or what have you. We just need to, if we can provide a concrete example, our own proverbial city on a hill through the way we live, I think that that can be just as effective, or if not more so, than a simple 10-minute video on the internet.
Yeah, obviously, guys, as I said before, never make the internet a surrogate for life, right? Everyone should be involved in their own religious communities as priority number one.
Yeah.
But that's a great point. Great point. Did Chroma go already?
He doesn't talk much.
Yeah,
okay, well, do you want to go, or?
I already went.
Okay, I'm going to see if I can unmute our last guest.
Anarcho didn't go.
Yeah.
Nuo, do you have a working microphone?
I do. Sorry. All I'll say is I'll just throw out 3 policies and 1 principle. I think in terms of policies, I would say try to keep mass migration under control, reform trade policies. I'm not a protectionist, but I do think we need to control how trade affects us, or else all we're doing is serving the interests of global capitalists and imperial ambitions would be the three policies we could advocate. And then I think we didn't talk about this principle tonight as much as I wanted, which is a shame, but I think the idea of subsidiarism should be applied more. Like, for instance, education was brought up.
That could be a whole separate hangout.
Yeah, I would love to talk about just that principle. But anyways, that's pretty much what I would pursue in terms of trying to win back the culture war from the material elites and whatnot.
Excellent. Well, I don't hear anything from Nuo, who's the other person here. So I'm taking.
There you go. He unmuted.
Is he have working mic? Do you want to say anything? The first and last thing you'll say before we close the stream out.
We haven't decided on a topic for next time.
Well, I think that we'll discuss those in conversation with me. You'll just email me your stuff.
Oh, okay.
I think if you want, I guess like before anything, if you want a laugh, because I keep finding these absurd new atheist stuff. Look up, go to the channel Science Net, and it's just literally just atheist BuzzFeed.
Yeah, I saw that the other day, and that is.
I think I'm gonna make my next video on that. 10 things the ways atheists blew our mind.
Oh, I want to.
Oh, I've seen that.
Actually, animation for you that might be more than a video. But anyway, we'll discuss what we do next time offline. But I think that we'll just have to close it up here. I'd like to thank all of you guys for coming on and discussing this. It was an excellent stream. Thank you to all the new people, Enrico and Jonathan. And I'll definitely be posting the YouTube links of the people who participated in the stream in the channel description when it comes online. So thank you guys all, and I'll see you guys probably in a few more weeks for another one of the Hangouts.
Bye, Robot.
God bless you all.
All right, everybody.
Take care.
God bless you.
See ya.
Congratulations.